This is a compilation of over 3 hours of Sith Lords explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with the most terrifying Sith Lords explained. The Sith are some of the most iconic villains in all of fiction, but the ones that truly terrify you aren't the ones swinging lightsabers. They're the ones who destroy entire civilizations without ever raising their voice. Today, I'm breaking down the most terrifying Sith Lords in Star Wars history and exactly what makes each one so dangerous. Starting with the one who fooled an entire galaxy, Darth Sidious. Here's what makes Darth Sidious the most terrifying Sith Lord who ever lived. It's not the Force lightning, it's not the cackling laugh or the melted face. It's the fact that for decades he was just a guy, a polite, soft-spoken senator from Naboo, a chancellor who smiled at press conferences and shook hands with Jedi Masters. Nobody suspected a thing, and that's exactly the point. Sidious didn't conquer the galaxy through brute force, he conquered it through patience. He manipulated both sides of the Clone Wars simultaneously across a 3-year conflict. Every single Republic soldier who died fighting for democracy, they were dying on Sidious's command. Every separatist droid that rolled off the assembly line, also his. He was playing chess against himself, and the entire galaxy was the board. But here's where the scale becomes genuinely horrifying. The Jedi Order numbered around 10,000 members, and Order 66 decimated them in a single stroke. Thousands were gunned down by their own clone troopers across battlefields galaxy-wide, and the survivors were hunted for years afterward by Darth Vader and the Inquisitors. A systematic purge triggered by one phrase, broadcast from a man sitting calmly in a Senate chamber. He didn't even stand up, and that was just the beginning. He ruled the Galactic Empire for roughly 23 years. The Death Star, a weapon that could obliterate entire planets, was just one tool in a much larger machine of total control. Trillions dead. Entire star systems crushed under Imperial rule, all because one man decided to be patient. Then there's the part that reframes everything. Sidious figured out how to transfer his consciousness between bodies. Death itself wasn't a problem for him. His reign wasn't just long, it was potentially infinite. Some fans argue his return in Episode 9 cheapens Anakin's sacrifice. Others see it as the ultimate proof that Sidious was always too dangerous to ever truly stay dead. Either way, the implication is the same. You don't beat Sidious, you just delay him. But Sidious, for all his manipulation, still operated within systems he could control. The next Sith Lord on this list didn't operate within anything. He consumed it. Darth Nihilus. Most Sith Lords wear masks to intimidate you. Nihilus wore his to keep himself from eating you alive. And I mean that literally. His mask wasn't armor, wasn't decoration, wasn't some dark side fashion statement. It was a containment vessel, the only thing standing between every living creature in his vicinity and instant death. Let that recolor everything you're about to hear. Darth Nihilus wasn't a person, not anymore. He was a wound in the Force, a void shaped like a man, where a human being used to be. Whatever identity he once had got swallowed whole by the dark side until nothing remained but hunger. Pure, mechanical, endless hunger. Think of a black hole with a lightsaber. That's Nihilus. And here's where it gets terrifying. He consumed the entire population of the planet Qatar. Millions of living beings gone in an instant. Not through an army, not through a super weapon, through force drain. He fed on their life energy the way you breathe air, involuntarily and completely. One moment, an entire civilization existed. The next, nothing. Just silence and empty buildings. The Jedi had gathered on Qatar specifically because they thought their numbers would protect them. Every single one of them was wrong, but Qatar wasn't even the limit of what he could do. Nihilus could drain entire starship crews from across star systems. No physical proximity required. Distance offered zero protection. You didn't need to be in the same room, the same planet, or even the same solar system. If he turned his hunger toward you, you were already dead. Here's the thing that separates Nihilus from every other Sith on this list. Sidious was terrifying because of his intelligence, his patience, his control. Nihilus is terrifying because there is no intelligence left. No control, no ambition to exploit, no fear to leverage, no ego to manipulate. You cannot reason with a black hole, you cannot negotiate with starvation. He wasn't choosing to be evil, he simply consumed because that's all he was anymore. And that raises a genuine question the community still debates. Does Nihilus even qualify as a Sith Lord in any meaningful sense? Or is he something worse? A warning of what happens when dark side power completely devours the person wielding it, leaving nothing behind but the appetite. But if a mindless void sounds bad, Wait until you meet a Sith Lord who built an entire empire on the idea that he should be the only one left standing. Darth Krayt. You probably don't know who this is, and that's exactly why he belongs on this list. Darth Krayt is one of the most dangerous Sith Lords ever created, and most Star Wars fans have never even heard his name. He exists in the Legends-era comics, buried under decades of more mainstream stories, which means he's been flying under the radar while doing things that would make Palpatine nervous. Here's what Krayt did. He looked at the Sith's entire 1,000-year playbook, the rule of two that Darth Bane established, and threw it in the garbage. Gone. He replaced it with something called the One Sith, and the structure was simple. There was one true master, him. Every other Sith in the Order was a tool, a weapon, something to be pointed at a target and discarded when it broke. No apprentice scheming to overthrow the master, no succession plan, no power sharing, just Krayt at the top, forever, and he meant forever, literally. Krayt survived for over a century and a half by hiding in forced stasis on Korriban, clinging to life far beyond what any normal being should endure, but his body was betraying him the entire time. Yuuzhan Vong bio implants were slowly consuming him from the inside, coral-like growths spreading across his flesh, threatening to kill the very man who refused to die. His survival wasn't built on strength. It was built on desperation, a constant war against his own body that never stopped. But here's where the ambition gets terrifying. Krayt didn't just rebuild the Sith, he conquered the galaxy. Roughly 130 years after the events most fans are familiar with, after every institution that had ever opposed the Sith had crumbled, Krayt stepped into the vacuum and took everything. He deposed Emperor Rowan Fel and seized the Imperial throne for himself. He crushed multiple Force-wielding rivals with his own hands. This wasn't a Sith who delegated. He removed his enemies face to face, and yet his greatest strength was also his greatest flaw. By making himself the only point that mattered, by eliminating any legitimate successor, Krayt built a Sith empire that was simultaneously more powerful and more fragile than anything before it. Every Sith answered to him. Every operation depended on him. If he fell, the entire structure collapsed overnight. He was so obsessed with absolute control that he engineered his own single point of failure, a tyrant so complete he became his own weakness. Most fans will never read the comics where Krayt lives, which is a shame, because what he pulled off is staggering. But Krayt conquered a galaxy that was already broken. The next Sith on this list didn't have that luxury. He had to break it himself. Darth Malak. Most Sith Lords have a plan, a philosophy, some grand vision they use to justify the carnage. Darth Malak had none of that. He was a wrecking ball with a lightsaber, and that's exactly what made him one of the most dangerous Sith to ever live. Let me explain. Malak was Revan's apprentice during the Jedi Civil War, and for a while the two of them were unstoppable together. Revan was the strategist, the visionary, the one with the long game. Malak was the muscle, but here's the thing about being the muscle. Eventually you start thinking you don't need the brain, so Malak made his move. And it wasn't some elaborate Sith power play. He didn't challenge Revan to a duel. He didn't outmaneuver him politically. He waited until Revan's ship was engaged in battle, then fired on it from behind. While Revan was fighting the Republic, his own apprentice shot him in the back. The Jedi boarded the crippled vessel, captured Revan, wiped his memory, and Malak just took over. One cowardly strike disguised as cunning, and the most brilliant Sith mind of the era was erased. And what did Malak do with all that power? He burned everything. His first major move was an orbital bombardment of the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. Dozens of Jedi thought they were safe in a hidden sanctuary, training the next generation. Malak turned it to rubble from orbit. No warning, no demands, just destruction. That wasn't strategy, that was a statement. Then he captured Bastila Shan, one of the most powerful Jedi of her era, famous for her battle meditation ability that could turn the tide of entire wars. Malak didn't just imprison her, he broke her. Through sustained psychological and physical torture, he shattered her will until she turned to the dark side completely. He took the Republic's greatest weapon and made it his own. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. The Starforge under Malak's control was producing warships fueled by dark side energy on an essentially unlimited basis. Infinite production, no supply chains to disrupt, no factories to bomb. The longer the war went on, the stronger his fleet became. Conventional military strategy simply could not match that output. And yet his empire had zero foundation. No ideology, no governing philosophy, no succession plan. It was pure destruction anchored to one man's brutality. The moment Malak died, the entire thing collapsed like it never existed. That's the terrifying truth about Malak. Sith, like Sidious or Crate, build empires that outlast battles. Malak was a wildfire. No direction, no purpose, just consumption. And wildfires don't negotiate, they don't scheme, they just burn until there's nothing left or someone puts them out. His lack of discipline made him unpredictable in a way that calculated Sith never are, because you can't anticipate a man who has no plan beyond total annihilation. But if Malak represents Sith power without restraint, the next Sith on this list represents something far more unsettling. Sith power with centuries of patience behind it. Darth Plagueis. Every other Sith on this list wanted to conquer the galaxy. Plagueis wanted to conquer death itself. And that distinction is what makes him arguably the most terrifying name in Sith history, despite the fact that he never appears on screen. Not once. You've never seen his face, never heard his voice, never watched him ignite a lightsaber, and yet his shadow stretches across the entire Skywalker saga like a stain that nobody can wash out. Here's what makes Plagueis different from every Sith who came before him. He wasn't interested in armies. He wasn't interested in thrones. He was interested in midichlorians, the microscopic organisms that connect all living things to the Force, and according to everything we know about his research, he figured out how to manipulate them at a biological level, not just to destroy life, but to prevent death entirely. Let that sink in. A Sith Lord who could theoretically keep anyone alive forever. That's not a warrior, that's not a politician, that's something closer to a god. But Plagueis didn't stumble into this power. He clawed his way to it. He murdered his own master, Darth Tenebrous, to claim the Sith lineage. Then he spent decades, literal decades, quietly infiltrating galactic politics, positioning the Sith for a takeover so massive that nobody would see it coming until it was already over. He wasn't playing a game of years, he was playing a game of centuries. The patience required for that isn't human, it's something else entirely. And here's the kicker. While he was engineering the fall of the Republic from the shadows, he was also personally training the man who would eventually kill him. Sheev Palpatine, Darth Sidious. Plagueis handpicked him, molded him, taught him everything he knew about the dark side and galactic manipulation. He built the perfect weapon and then handed it a knife, because for all his brilliance, for all his mastery over life and death, Plagueis died in the most pathetic way imaginable, murdered in his sleep. His own apprentice unleashed the Force on him while he was vulnerable, striking him down in the one moment he let his guard slip. The one Sith Lord who could reportedly prevent others from dying couldn't save himself. That irony isn't just poetic, it's the entire thesis of the Sith distilled into one moment. Trust nobody. Power invites betrayal, always. But his work didn't die with him. Sidious's entire obsession with resurrection, the cloning, the return on Exegol, all of it traces back to Plagueis' research. The man has been dead for decades, and his ideas are still shaping the galaxy, still corrupting it. Where Malak was chaos and destruction, Plagueis was patience so extreme, it stopped being a virtue and became something deeply unsettling. He didn't need to burn worlds, he just needed time. And the one thing he couldn't control was the apprentice standing behind him. But if a Sith who conquered death is terrifying, wait until you meet one who conquered something even more fundamental, the will of the Force itself. Darth Revan. Every Sith Lord on this list so far has something in common. They were either born into darkness, seduced by it, or consumed by forces beyond their control. Revan is different. Revan was a hero first, a genuine, decorated, universally respected Jedi war hero who led the Republic's forces against the Mandalorians when the Jedi Council refused to act. He saved millions of lives. He was brilliant, idealistic, and beloved. And then he became one of the worst Sith Lords in galactic history anyway. That's what makes Revan so deeply uncomfortable. There's no singular moment of corruption you can point to. No Palpatine whispering in his ear, no ancient artifact twisting his mind. It was war itself. The exposure to death on an industrial scale, the impossible decisions, the realization that mercy and survival don't always coexist. The Mandalorian Wars didn't just harden Revan, they revealed something that was already there. His Sith crusade lasted approximately 4 years. Millions of Jedi and Republic forces died. He personally commanded fleets that leveled Jedi temples. He established multiple Sith academies across the galaxy. He trained dozens of dark Jedi. This wasn't a man who simply fell to the dark side. He built an entire institution around his fall. He created infrastructure for evil. That takes planning. That takes clarity. That takes someone who knows exactly what they're doing and does it anyway. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. When the Jedi Council finally captured Revan, their solution wasn't imprisonment. It wasn't execution. It was a complete memory wipe. They erased his identity and implanted a new one, a blank slate, a person who had no idea they'd ever been a Sith Lord. Think about that for a second. The Jedi's answer to Revan wasn't justice, it was deletion. They looked at this man and decided the only way to make him good again was to destroy who he was entirely. And that raises a question that the Star Wars universe has never comfortably answered. If you have to erase someone to make them a good person, were they ever actually redeemable? Or were the Jedi just building a better mask? Because the split existed. The Sith Conqueror and the redeemed Jedi lived inside the same body simultaneously. That's not corruption being removed, that's two versions of the same person coexisting, and the implication is devastating. The darkness wasn't something done to Revan, it was something Revan always carried. The KOTOR fanbase has debated his identity, his gender, even his moral alignment for over 2 decades now. The game lets players decide who Revan truly is, and that ambiguity isn't a flaw, it's the entire point. Revan is terrifying precisely because he could be anyone. The most dedicated, selfless, brilliant person you know could look into the abyss of war and come back as something unrecognizable. Every other Sith on this list chose power or was consumed by it. Revan earned it through sacrifice, then weaponized everything he'd learned to protect the galaxy against it. He's not just a cautionary tale, he's a mirror. But if Revan makes you question whether anyone can truly be saved from the dark side, the next entry makes you question whether the dark side even needs a person at all. Darth Traya. Every Sith Lord on this list wanted something. Power, conquest, immortality, survival. Darth Traya wanted to kill the Force itself. Not metaphorically, not philosophically. She literally wanted to sever the connection between the Force and every living thing in the galaxy, permanently, because she believed the Force was the problem. And here's what makes her genuinely terrifying. She might have been right. Traya operated under the name Kreia for years, posing as a blind, frail, seemingly helpless old woman who served as an advisor and mentor throughout the events of Knights of the Old Republic 2. Everyone around her believed she was harmless, a broken exile clinging to relevance, a former Jedi with nothing left to offer but cryptic wisdom and vague warnings. That was the mask. Underneath it was a woman who had personally trained Revan and the Exile, two of the most powerful and consequential Force users in the entire Old Republic era. She mentored both of them, and she betrayed every single one of them. Not out of impulse, not out of anger, but as calculated moves in a plan that spanned decades. She even influenced the broader Sith triumvirate, shaping Nihilus and Sign into weapons before they inevitably turned on her. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Traya's philosophy wasn't raving madness, it was coherent. She looked at the endless cycle of Jedi and Sith tearing the galaxy apart for thousands of years and concluded that both sides were parasites. The Force itself, in her view, was a corrupting influence that manipulated living beings like puppets, dragging civilizations into war after war after war so it could maintain some cosmic balance that nobody ever asked for. The Jedi served it blindly, the Sith fed on it selfishly, and trillions of ordinary people suffered because of both. Her solution was extinction, not of people, of the Force. She possessed the ability to drain the Force from those around her, severing their connection permanently, not killing them, but ripping away the one thing that defined their existence within that framework. Her apprentice Nihilus took that concept to a planetary scale, consuming entire worlds of their Force energy. But Traya was the architect. She understood the principle, she understood the wound in the Force that the Exile represented, and she intended to weaponize it against the Force itself. Imagine a galaxy where the thing that drives every major conflict just ceases to exist. That was her endgame, and she had access to worse. The Malachor Mass Shadow Generator, a superweapon capable of mass genocide through gravitational manipulation, had already been used once. She'd witnessed it, she knew exactly what it could do, and she was willing to use it again if it served her purpose. The truly disturbing part isn't the power, it's the persuasion. Traya is arguably the only Sith Lord in Star Wars history who could sit across from you, lay out her entire plan, and genuinely make you consider that she was right. The game knows this. KOTOR 2 doesn't treat her like a cartoon villain. It lets her arguments breathe, it lets her challenge the player's assumptions about the Force, about the Jedi, about the entire moral framework Star Wars is built on, and it never fully refutes her. That's harder to fight than lightning. That's harder to fight than a superweapon. A villain who makes sense, who speaks calmly, who never raises her voice, and who could convince you that destroying everything sacred is the only rational choice. Every other Sith on this list wants to rule the galaxy. Traya wanted to fundamentally unmake the thing the galaxy runs on. And the worst part? After hearing her out, you're not entirely sure she was wrong. But if a woman who wanted to kill the Force itself sounds like the ceiling for Sith terror, there's one more. And this one didn't need philosophy or super weapons. He just needed a suit, a respirator, and 23 years of unrelenting violence. Darth Vader. Every Sith Lord on this list is terrifying in the abstract. Ancient horrors, galactic manipulators, wounds in the Force itself. You hear about them, you read about them, you piece together their atrocities from holocrons and old stories. Darth Vader is not abstract. Darth Vader is in the hallway, in the dark, breathing. He closes this list not because he's the most powerful Sith who ever lived. Sidious arguably holds that title. He's here because he is the most terrifying thing the dark side ever produced on a human level. Every other entry made you think. Vader makes you feel. Here's what 23 years of service to the Empire actually looked like. Entire star systems didn't surrender at the arrival of an Imperial fleet. They surrendered at the news that one man was aboard one of those ships. Vader force-choked his own officers for minor tactical failures, not enemies, his own people. He personally led ground assaults that killed thousands across multiple campaigns, not from a command bridge, but from the front line, lightsaber in hand, walking through blaster fire like it was rain. And then there's Alderaan. 4 billion people, gone. Not a military installation, not a strategic target, a demonstration. Vader stood on the Death Star and watched it happen. He didn't press the button, but he didn't stop it either. He was complicit in the single largest act of destruction in galactic history, and he said nothing. But the moment that defines Vader's horror isn't Alderaan, it's Order 66. He walked into the Jedi Temple, the place that raised him, trained him, gave him everything he was, and he killed them. An estimated 10,000 Jedi, including younglings. Children who looked up at him and called him Master Skywalker. Children who trusted him. He cut them down personally, not because Sidious was standing over his shoulder, because he chose to. Because he believed in that moment that this was the only path left. That's what separates Vader from every other name on this list. Nihilus was a void. Sidious was a schemer. Traya was a philosopher. Vader was a person, a husband, a father, a kid from Tatooine who built a pod racer and dreamed about seeing every star in the galaxy. And all of that got buried inside a black suit that breathed for him, moved for him, kept him alive against his will. The most disturbing dimension of Vader isn't the violence. It's the dehumanization. He wasn't fully man. He wasn't fully machine. He wasn't fully in control, and he wasn't fully enslaved. He was a brilliant warrior reduced to a weapon, and the worst part is that he could feel it. He knew what he'd lost. He knew what he'd become, and he kept fighting anyway, because stopping meant confronting every single thing he'd done, and that was more terrifying than any enemy he'd ever faced. For 23 years, that was his existence. Not ruling, not conquering, serving, a slave again, just like he'd been as a child on Tatooine, except this time the chains were made of the dark side and his own guilt. And then came the final moment. Luke on the floor of the Death Star, Sidious pouring lightning into his son, and Vader made a choice. He picked up his master and threw him into the reactor shaft. One act. one moment of defiance after more than 2 decades of atrocity. The question that still haunts audiences 40 years later is whether that single moment earns absolution. Whether one act of love undoes 23 years of murder, whether saving your son cancels out the younglings, the officers, the 4 billion souls on Alderaan. Some people say yes, that's the entire point of redemption, that it's never too late. Others say the math doesn't work, that you can't stack one good choice against a mountain of bodies and call it even. The truth is, there's no clean answer, and that's exactly why Vader is the most terrifying Sith Lord ever created. Not because of what he did, because of what he makes you feel when you think about it. Grief, horror, pity, and the uncomfortable recognition that the most dangerous monster in the galaxy was, underneath it all, just a broken man who never stopped being afraid. The Sith Lords are some of the most iconic villains in Star Wars history, but not all of them operated on the same level. Some were architects of galactic domination, some were just really good at stabbing people. Today, I'm ranking all 12 major Sith Lords by strategic significance, from specialized assassins to the ultimate masters of the galaxy. And trust me, the top 3 will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about Sith power. Darth Maul. Darth Maul is either the most iconic assassin in Star Wars or the ultimate example of wasted potential, and I can prove it. When he appeared in The Phantom Menace, Maul wielded a unique double-bladed lightsaber, killed Qui-Gon Jinn in direct combat, and looked like the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever seen. Then Obi-Wan bisected him and dropped him down a reactor shaft. Turns out, numbered Maul survived through sheer hatred, spent years with a cybernetic lower body, eventually took over Mandalore, and killed countless Republic forces. But here's the thing, he never operated with independent strategic vision. Every major move Maul made was either following Sidious's orders or reacting to being cut in half. He was a weapon, not an architect. The fan debate about whether Maul was ever truly a Sith Lord or just Sidious's disposable instrument has raged for years. His survival proves Sith endurance can overcome catastrophic damage, but if you can't think beyond revenge, does raw power even matter? At least Maul had a body to lose, unlike the next Sith Lord, who decided flesh was optional. Darth Momin. Momin is a ghost in a machine, literally. This ancient Sith sorcerer from roughly 4,000 years before the Skywalker saga figured out how to transfer his consciousness into his armor, making him functionally immortal as long as the physical object survives. Not through cloning, not through essence transfer into living hosts, but by becoming the armor itself, which is both brilliant and horrifying, because it means Momin can't die unless someone destroys the mask, but he also can't exist without it. Before you dismiss this as some weird footnote, hear me out. Momin mastered Sith alchemy to the point where he could create techno-organic abominations capable of consuming entire civilizations. Not metaphorically, these things would literally devour populations and incorporate biological matter into mechanical constructs. The dude wasn't just evil, he was artistically evil, treating horror as a creative medium. He shows up in the Darth Vader comics, helping design Vader's fortress on Mustafar, meaning even thousands of years after his physical death, he's still influencing major canonical locations. Here's where it gets complicated. Momin's immortality method is both evolution and limitation. He can't be killed conventionally, but he's also stuck possessing whoever wears the armor, operating through proxies instead of direct power. Compare that to Plagueis manipulating midi-chlorians or Sidious building empires, and Momin feels more like a haunted relic than a strategic mastermind. But if you think being trapped in armor is limiting, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who became a wound in the Force itself, Darth Nihilus. Darth Nihilus is either the most dangerous Sith Lord in history, or he's not a Sith Lord at all, and I can prove it. He appeared around 3951 BBY as one-third of the Sith Triumvirate alongside Darth Sion and Darth Traya. But calling him a Sith Lord is like calling a black hole a strategic military asset. He didn't conquer worlds, he consumed them. Entire planets, every living thing, the Force itself. He'd drain a star system of all life force just to sustain his own existence, which is, not ideal. The Jedi called him a wound in the Force. Not a practitioner of the dark side, a wound. An actual rupture in reality that violates every conventional understanding of Force balance. His flagship, the Ravager, wasn't a ship anymore by the time players encountered him in KOTOR 2. It was a corpse held together by his hunger. Here's where it gets weird. Nihilus had zero strategy, no grand plan, no empire-building ambitions, just endless consumption. He's a sentient void that happens to wear armor. You can't negotiate with him, you can't redirect him, you can't predict him. He's a natural disaster that used to be a person, and the only solution was to kill him before he ate the galaxy. The Jedi exile managed it, barely. But if you think one cosmic horror is disturbing, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who commanded 2,000 star systems through political manipulation alone, Darth Tyrannus. Count Dooku seems like the tragic noble who fell from grace, but the reality is way darker than that. Before you give him credit for good intentions, consider this. Dooku commanded over 2,000 worlds in the Separatist Alliance and orchestrated the Clone Wars that killed billions. Not millions, billions. The droid armies he coordinated weren't just military assets, they were instruments of systematic slaughter across entire star systems. Every planetary blockade, every orbital bombardment traces back to Dooku's military strategy. Here's where it gets weird. Dooku trained multiple dark side assassins like Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress, while simultaneously serving as Palpatine's apprentice. That's a deliberate violation of the rule of two that Palpatine allowed because he viewed Dooku as expendable from day one. Ventress wasn't even considered a true Sith, just a disposable tool. Tyrannus wasn't building a legacy, he was a placeholder executing someone else's vision. And here's the kicker, his noble Jedi backstory doesn't excuse anything. Dooku defected around 32 BBY with full awareness that Palpatine was manipulating the entire conflict. He wasn't some tragic pawn who got tricked, he was a willing architect of galactic genocide who rationalized mass murder as political reform. The fan debate about whether Dooku was a genuine believer or just Palpatine's tool misses the point entirely. Billions died either way. And when Anakin decapitated him in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine didn't even blink. Dooku was always meant to be discarded, but if you think commanding armies makes you powerful, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who rewrote the entire foundation of what it means to be Sith. Darth Revan commanded over 50,000 troops and orchestrated two massive galactic-scale wars, the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War, making him responsible for one of the largest military conflicts in pre-Empire history. But here's where it gets complicated. He's also one of the only major Sith Lords who achieved genuine redemption while keeping his full memory and power intact, which shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about the dark side. Most Sith who turn good either die immediately, lose their memories, or weren't that committed to begin with. Revan was different. He fell to the dark side willingly, commanded an empire, personally killed Jedi Masters, and then chose to come back to the light side without conveniently forgetting any of it. That's not supposed to happen. The dark side doesn't just let you walk away, and here's the kicker. Revan is the player character in Knights of the Old Republic 1, which means his entire biography is player dependent. You can make him light side, dark side, or somewhere in between. Canon variations exist because different players made different choices, so the community can't even agree on what his true nature was. Was he always destined for redemption, or did he genuinely fall and claw his way back out? The debate has been raging for 2 decades. Some fans argue the redemption arc proves the dark side isn't absolute corruption. Others think it undermines his Sith credentials entirely. Either way, commanding 50,000 soldiers across multiple star systems while juggling 2 wars puts him in rare company strategically, even if his independent sovereignty was limited compared to what came later. But if you think leading galactic wars is impressive, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who didn't conquer anything and still changed everything. Starting with mass murder, Darth Bane. Darth Bane didn't conquer a single planet. He didn't overthrow a government. He didn't lead armies across star systems. What he did do was commit the largest mass murder in Sith history, killing thousands of his own kind to enforce a philosophy he invented. And somehow, that made him more strategically significant than almost every Sith who came before. Around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Bane looked at the sprawling Sith Empire and decided the problem wasn't the Jedi, it was other Sith. Too many egos, too much infighting, too much visibility. So he created the rule of 2. 1 master, 1 apprentice. That's it, no exceptions. And when the existing Sith refused to follow his new doctrine, he systematically executed every single one of them. Not through political maneuvering, through superior power and ruthless efficiency. He traded galactic conquest for survival, betting that a hidden lineage of ever-strengthening Sith would eventually destroy the Jedi more effectively than any visible empire ever could. Here's the thing, he was right. Every Sith Lord from Bane forward traces their lineage directly to him. Tenebris learned from Bane's system. Plagueis refined it. Sidious perfected it. The Thousand-Year Shadow Campaign Bane initiated culminated in Order 66 and the fall of the Republic. Fans debate whether the Rule of Two genuinely worked or just got lucky with exceptional individuals like Palpatine, but the numbers don't lie. Bane's doctrine survived a millennium and produced the only Sith to achieve total galactic domination. At least Bane had a philosophy, unlike the immortal schemer who came next. Darth Tenebris. Here's the thing about Darth Tenebris. He's the architect of immortality who got killed using his own blueprint, and I can prove it. Tenebris served as Darth Plagueis' master roughly 200 years before the Skywalker saga, operating in complete secrecy while perfecting techniques that would obsess every Sith who came after him. He discovered alchemical and biological pathways to extending life, manipulating midi-chlorians in ways that hadn't been documented in centuries. His research became the foundation for everything Plagueis and Palpatine would later attempt. Every longevity experiment, every life extension technique, every method of cheating death traces back to Tenebris cracking the code first. But here's where it gets dark. Plagueis assassinated him using the exact immortality techniques Tenebris taught him. The master who unlocked the secrets of eternal life got murdered by his own methodology. Perfect ironic subversion where your greatest legacy becomes your undoing. Nobody talks about Tenebris because his screen time is basically zero. He appears in extended materials and gets referenced in passing, but casual fans have never heard his name. Which is wild because his influence shaped the entire dark side's philosophical obsession with conquering death. Without Tenebris, Plagueis never experiments on midi-chlorians. Without those experiments, Palpatine never learns the techniques he uses to survive beyond death. The question becomes, do fans underestimate him? Limited appearances versus foundational impact? I'd argue yes, but at least he died quietly, unlike his apprentice, who took those same techniques and pushed them even further. Darth Plagueis the Wise spent over a century manipulating galactic events from the shadows, yet nobody outside the Sith knew he existed until Palpatine casually dropped his name to seduce Anakin. Before you dismiss him as just another forgotten schemer, understand this. Plagueis represented the absolute apex of Sith scientific knowledge. While other Sith lords conquered through armies or raw power, Plagueis treated the dark side like a laboratory experiment, and his specialty was death itself. He conducted extensive genetic manipulation across multiple species and allegedly discovered how to influence midi-chlorians to create life and prevent death. The moon scientist approached immortality through methodology rather than mysticism, documenting every experiment, every failure, every breakthrough. For decades, this worked flawlessly. He ruled in complete secrecy as Sidious's master, shaping the galaxy without a single being knowing his name. But here's where it gets darkly ironic. Palpatine claims Plagueis could save others from death, but not himself, which is either the greatest failure in Sith history or the most elaborate lie ever told. Because around 32 BBY, Sidious murdered him while he slept. The man who mastered cheating death got killed in his sleep like an ordinary person. Zero defenses, zero contingencies that worked, zero survival despite all that knowledge. The community remains genuinely divided on whether Plagueis actually died or transferred his consciousness somewhere else, and whether Palpatine's entire story about his abilities was even accurate. Some fans argue Plagueis was the more competent strategist who simply lost a single moment. Others point out that wisdom means nothing if you can't see the obvious betrayal coming. At least Plagueis died in his sleep. The next Sith Lord suffered for over 2 decades in a walking prison. Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, became Darth Vader at age 22 and served Palpatine for 23 years. He commanded millions of stormtroopers, orchestrated the execution of over 10,000 Jedi through Order 66, and held the rank of Supreme Commander with direct authority over the entire Imperial military. He destroyed worlds. He enforced galactic policy through terror. He was by every metric one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But here's the thing, he was never in charge. Vader had unlimited military power, but zero strategic autonomy. He could obliterate a planet on a whim, but Sidious decided which planet. He commanded millions of troops, but Palpatine directed the campaigns. Every decision Vader made existed within parameters someone else set. He was the ultimate paradox, a man with immense authority who remained perpetually subordinate. The galaxy's enforcer, not its architect. And that leads to the big debate. Did Vader ever truly embrace Sith philosophy, or was he just Anakin in a suit, perpetually conflicted and controlled? The community remains divided. Some argue he was a genuine Sith Lord who chose darkness. Others see him as a broken man trapped in servitude, never fully committing to the ideology. The evidence supports both. He slaughtered Jedi without hesitation, but he also saved his son and killed Palpatine, ending the Sith lineage entirely. That final act matters. Vader served the Sith for 2 decades, but his redemption destroyed them. One choice erased everything Sidious built. But if you think commanding a galactic military without sovereignty is frustrating, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who ruled an entire empire for over 1,300 consecutive years, Darth Vitiate. Vitiate ruled the Sith Empire for over 1,300 years, 1,300 consecutive years. Through essence transfer, he maintained absolute control across multiple star systems, commanding millions of servants and soldiers through entire civilizations, rising and falling while he remained constant. That's not a reign, that's geological time. Before you dismiss this as Legends nonsense, understand what that means practically. Vitiate manipulated galactic events across centuries. He orchestrated the Revan storyline, consumed entire planets' life force in single rituals, and encountered multiple generations of Force users who lived and died while he simply continued existing. Sidious conquered the galaxy in 13 years. Vitiate maintained an empire longer than some species' recorded histories. The immortality itself is what separates him. Not cloning, not cybernetics, but essence transfer. His consciousness jumping between bodies, preserving continuity of experience, and strategic planning across 13 centuries. Every other Sith we've covered either died or required technological resurrection. Vitiate just kept going. Here's where it gets complicated. Duration versus efficiency. Sidious achieved total galactic conquest in a fraction of Vitiate's lifespan, but Vitiate's millennium-spanning manipulation demonstrates patience and long-term planning. Sidious never needed. It's the philosophical debate between concentrated power and sustained dominion. SWTOR players revere Vitiate as the immortal emperor, the ultimate expression of Sith longevity. Post-2014 canon questions linger about whether his achievements remain valid, but the numbers don't lie. Longest continuous Sith reign in documented history, predating Sidious's empire by millennia. But if you think 13 centuries of essence transfer represents true immortality, Krayt took a completely different approach to eternal rule. Darth Krayt. After 1,000 years of the rule of 2, one Sith decided Bane's entire philosophy was bullshit. Darth Krayt didn't just break the rule of 2. He obliterated it, establishing the one Sith order with hundreds of Sith operating under his command and ruling as Galactic Emperor approximately 130 years after the Skywalker saga ended. Think about the boldness required to invert a doctrine that successfully produced Sidious after a millennium of careful adherence. Bane built the rule of 2 to concentrate power and ensure survival through secrecy. Krayt looked at that success and said, "Cool, but what if I just had an army of Sith instead?" And it worked. Krayt commanded vast military forces, achieved resurrection through multiple methods including cloning, and maintained galactic dominion across generations. When Cade Skywalker showed up to continue his family's tradition of opposing Sith Lords, Krayt was ready for him, representing the next evolution of generational conflict. Legends fans revere Krayt as the ultimate expansion of Sith philosophy, while Disney canon preferers often overlook him entirely. But whether his approach represents strategic evolution or dangerous regression from Bane's proven formula remains one of the most fascinating debates in extended lore. He proved you could rule an empire with hundreds of Sith and maintain control. But if you think breaking 1,000-year traditions is impressive, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who orchestrated the entire sequence of events that made every other name on this list possible. Darth Sidious, Palpatine didn't just win. He won so completely that the galaxy didn't even realize it had lost until it was decades too late. Every other Sith on this list achieved something impressive. Bane created a doctrine. Vitiate ruled for centuries. Vader commanded armies, but Sidious orchestrated the systematic annihilation of over 10,000 Jedi, the collapse of a 25,000-year-old republic, and the rise of a galactic empire, all while convincing everyone he was a harmless politician. For 32 years, he manipulated every major event in the galaxy from complete shadows. The Clone Wars, his design, the droid army, his funding, Anakin's fall, his patient grooming, Order 66, his single command that erased the Jedi in one afternoon. And here's the thing. He didn't need a massive Sith army or ancient rituals to consume planets. He used bureaucracy, shell corporations, and a smile. He turned the Republic against itself and made the Jedi destroy their own credibility. By the time anyone realized what had happened, he controlled the Senate, the military, the courts, and the infrastructure of the entire galaxy. 20 years of unchallenged rule followed, then he died. And 30 years later, he came back anyway, because he'd prepared clone bodies in advance. Whether you think that Return and Rise of Skywalker was brilliant or narratively catastrophic, it proves one thing. Sidious planned for immortality more thoroughly than Plagueis ever managed. He's the final product of Bane's 1,000-year lineage. The Rule of Two was designed to concentrate power, eliminate weakness, and produce the ultimate Sith. And it worked. Sidious proved it by conquering the galaxy, destroying the Jedi, and ruling longer than any Sith in modern history. No one else on this list matched that combination of patience, manipulation, and total victory. Darth Vader is the most iconic Sith Lord ever created, but he's not the most terrifying. Not even close. Today, I'm breaking down every Sith Lord more terrifying than Vader and explaining exactly why. Starting with the one who built the entire system. Vader lived inside. Darth Bane. Here's the thing about Darth Bane. He wasn't the strongest Sith who ever lived. He was something far more dangerous. He was the one who rewrote the rules entirely. Around 1032 BBY, the Brotherhood of Darkness was wiped out, every single member except him. And instead of mourning, Bane looked at the smoldering wreckage of 1,000 Sith Lords who couldn't stop fighting each other long enough to beat the Jedi and said, yeah, this whole system is broken. So he invented the Rule of Two. One master to embody power, one apprentice to crave it. That single decision governed the Sith for the next 1,000 years, all the way until Sidious dismantled the Republic from the inside. Vader followed a system. Bane invented it. But Bane wasn't just a philosopher with a cape. His Force lightning killed on contact. At the end of his life, he performed the ritual of power, literally dragging lightning from the sky into his own body, which is, not ideal for anyone standing nearby. But if Bane was the architect, the next Sith Lord on this list was the Wrecking Ball, Darth Malak. Malak didn't earn the title of Dark Lord. He stole it. While his master Revan was distracted, Malak fired on Revan's own flagship, seizing power in one of the most brutal betrayals in Sith history. And here's the thing, he was worse at the job in every way that mattered, except cruelty. In that department, Malak was a prodigy. He was proficient in Sith sorcery, particularly Force lightning, which he used liberally during torture sessions and drawn-out duels. But his real party trick involved the Starforge, an ancient automated shipyard built by the Rakatan Infinite Empire roughly 30,000 years before the Republic even existed. Malak captured Jedi from the destroyed Dantooine Enclave and fed them directly into the station. Let that sink in for a second. The Starforge could harness Force sensitives and channel their energy into a single subject. Malak used living Jedi as literal batteries, blurring the line between person and machine in a way that's genuinely body horror. He didn't rewrite the rules of the Sith like Bane did. He just broke everything in reach and plugged people into a wall socket to keep going. Revan came back, and without his ancient power source, Malak crumbled. But if Malak's cruelty was loud and visceral, the next Sith Lord on this list operated so quietly that even death itself didn't notice what he was doing. Darth Plagueis. Most Sith Lords want to conquer the galaxy. Plagueis wanted to conquer biology. He was a Moon Dark Lord who looked at the Force and saw something nobody else did, a system that could be hacked. While every other Sith was busy swinging lightsabers, Plagueis was in his lab trying to crack the source code of life itself. Here's the thing. According to his own apprentice, Darth Sidious, Plagueis could use the Force to influence midichlorians to create life. Not preserve it, not extend it, create it. He wasn't studying the Force like a monk. He was dissecting it like a scientist, convinced that immortality wasn't some mystical reward, but a biological puzzle waiting to be solved. But here's where it gets genuinely terrifying. His grand experiment to create a new Force-sensitive life form may have accidentally resulted in the conception of Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. Vader might literally owe his existence to a Plagueis experiment gone wrong. Where Vader served as an instrument of the Force, Plagueis tried to become the guy controlling the instrument panel. His research implied that midichlorians could be manipulated to bend biological existence to a dark side practitioner's will. His failure was more catastrophic than most Sith Lords' greatest successes, which is, not ideal. But if Plagueis was the mad scientist of the Sith, the next entry was something far more unpredictable. A war hero who burned the galaxy down on purpose. Darth Revan. Most Most Sith Lords on this list are terrifying because of what they did. Revan is terrifying because of what was done to him. Here's the thing. Revan wasn't some naive Jedi who got tricked into falling. He looked at the dark side with open eyes and said, yeah, I'll take that. Then he built a Sith empire so powerful it nearly erased the Galactic Republic from existence. Force storms, Force lightning, Force healing, precognition. His lightsaber skills alone were legendary, but combined with that arsenal, he was a one-man extinction event. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The Jedi captured him, wiped his mind, and rebuilt his entire identity from scratch. They didn't defeat Revan, they deleted him. Then they pointed whatever was left at the Sith and called it redemption. Think about that for a second. If someone reprograms you into being a good person, are you actually good? Or are you just a puppet wearing someone else's face? The Jedi essentially killed the real Revan and replaced him with a version they found more convenient. That's not a redemption arc. That's an identity horror story. Vader's moral journey is clean. Fall, suffer, redeem, die. Revan's is a philosophical nightmare with zero resolution. And that ambiguity is what makes him linger in your head long after you stop thinking about him. But if erased identity disturbs you, wait until you meet the Sith Lord, who survived for over 1,000 years by refusing to stay dead. Darth Krayt. Most Sith Lords are terrifying because of what they can do. Krayt is terrifying because of how long he's been doing it. Born a Shared Het, this man served as a Jedi Master and Clone Wars general. That's the prequel era. He was still actively killing people centuries later. After Order 66, Het didn't just survive, he reinvented himself. He fell to the dark side, founded an entirely new Sith order called the One Sith, and spent literal centuries on Korriban orchestrating the fall of the Galactic Alliance and the restoration of the Galactic Empire. Most people can't plan a week ahead. This guy was running schemes that took hundreds of years to pay off, and he was alive to see every single one of them land. But here's where it gets ridiculous. Even as an old, sick man, Krayt cut through 4 Imperial Knights like training dummies. He claimed to have killed thousands since the Clone Wars, and honestly, the math checks out. Telekinesis, Sith lightning, Force drain, memory manipulation, Force rage, astral projection, the ability to physically strike beings like Abeloth, who didn't even fully exist in normal reality. He had all of it. Then there's transfer essence, which let him hop his consciousness into new bodies, granting him functional immortality. In his prime, he could go toe-to-toe with Luke Skywalker and Abeloth in direct combat. The same Luke Skywalker widely considered the most powerful Jedi to ever live. But if Krayt is the long game personified, the next Sith on this list turned psychological warfare into an art form. Darth Zana. Most Sith Lords want to overpower you. Zana didn't need to. She'd just make you lose your mind first. Born Reign on the planet Somov Rit, she became Darth Bane's first apprentice in the newly reformed Sith Order. Her entire purpose was singular: carry the rule of 2 forward. Prove that Bane's system actually worked. Here's the thing. She didn't just prove it, she made it look easy. Zana mastered the doctrine of the ancient Sith magician Freeden Nad, which gave her access to sorcerous practices most Sith had forgotten existed. Her magic could drive people completely insane with fear. She could disguise herself and others as normal Jedi, walking right through enemy territory without raising a single alarm. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. A single spell she cast violently disrupted psychometric analysis a full decade later. 10 years, and the Force itself was still flinching from what she did. That's not power, that's a stain on reality. Her lightsaber skills were equally terrifying, just quieter. She mastered a defensive style so instinctive she could fend off any opponent indefinitely with minimal effort, just waiting for them to tire out or make one fatal mistake. She didn't need to beat you. She just needed you to beat yourself. Zana eventually trained Darth Cognis as her own apprentice, ensuring the chain survived. Bane built the system. Zana was the first test, and she passed without breaking a sweat. But if Zana proved the Sith could survive through secrecy and sorcery, the next Sith Lord on this list proved they could survive through something far more terrifying: the complete refusal to die. Darth Endedu. Every Sith Lord on this list carries the title Darth, but Endedu might be the reason that word exists in the first place. Known as the immortal god king of Prakith, Endedu reigned during or after the 100-Year Darkness, and there's strong evidence he was the original bearer of the Darth title. Every Sith Lord who came after him was essentially wearing his brand, but the title isn't what makes him terrifying. What makes him terrifying is what he figured out. Endedu created a Sith holocron containing one of the most closely guarded secrets in Sith history: transfer essence. The ability to rip your consciousness out of your dying body body and shove it into a new vessel. Functional immortality. Death becomes a minor inconvenience like a flat tire. Here's where it gets dark though. Endedu was so paranoid about his own people stealing this knowledge that he hoarded every scrap of Sith lore he could find. He didn't share, he didn't teach, he monopolized everything, using knowledge itself as a weapon against potential usurpers. The only thing this immortal God King feared was the people standing next to him, and he was right to be afraid. His fellow Sith Lords eventually betrayed and overthrew him, forcing him to flee Moraband entirely. But even in exile, his holocron survived. It found its way to the keep on Prakith, where it continued whispering secrets to anyone desperate enough to listen. Endedu established the single most terrifying precedent in Sith history, that death is optional. And if you think that idea stayed buried with him, wait until you hear about the fallen Jedi who took it even further. Freedon Nad. Most Sith Lords fall to the dark side gradually. Freedon Nad sprinted toward it, and his first step was murdering his own Jedi Master, Mata Tremaine, and walking away from the Order without looking back. He was a prodigy on Ossus, one of the most gifted students the Jedi had seen in generations, and he repaid that investment with a lightsaber through his teacher, which is, not ideal. But here's the thing. Nad didn't just leave the Jedi. He tracked down the ancient Sith Lord Nagasado on Yavin 4, apprenticed under his spirit, drained him of every scrap of forbidden knowledge, and then killed him too. Apparently, that was just his thing. Then he flew to Onderon, used sorcery to crush the existing power structure, and installed himself as king of the capital city Iziz. For nearly 4 decades, he ruled openly as both monarch and Sith Lord, not hiding in the shadows, not pulling strings from behind a curtain, sitting on a throne, wielding dark side mastery and political power simultaneously. Almost no other Sith even attempted that combination. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Freedon Nad died, and he simply did not care. His spirit refused to leave Onderon. For centuries after his physical death, his presence lingered over the planet like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Generations were born, lived, and died under the weight of a dead man's will. Where Endedu treated immortality like a science project, Nad treated it like a haunting. He proved that death wasn't an ending for a sufficiently powerful Sith, it was just a change in format. And that idea inspired every Sith who came after him to ask the same question: why stop at one lifetime? But if Nad's ghost haunted a single planet, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who dominated an entire empire while he was still breathing. Marka Ragnos. Here's something people forget about the Sith. They weren't always two weirdos in matching robes whispering about the dark side in a basement somewhere. There was a time when the Sith were a civilization, a real one, with armies, territories, political structures, the whole thing. And the man who held all of it together at its absolute peak was Marka Ragnos. Ragnos was a half-breed Dark Lord born before 5100 BBY, which makes him so ancient that most Sith on this list wouldn't exist for thousands of years after his death. He clawed his way to power by defeating a rival Dark Lord named Simus in single combat, and from that point forward, he ruled the entire Sith Empire for over a century. Not a decade, not a generation. Over 100 years of unbroken, unchallenged dominance. And he didn't just sit on a throne looking intimidating. Ragnos conducted brutal campaigns against Sith enemies, while simultaneously running one of the most sophisticated political operations in galactic history. He pitted rivals against each other, ensured nobody could consolidate enough power to threaten him, and maintained absolute control through raw force ability and sheer personal charisma. The guy was recognized as one of the most powerful force users in the combined history of both the Sith and the Jedi. But here's the part that really sells how terrifying he was. The moment he died, the entire empire fractured, succession disputes tore it apart. His personal power wasn't just an asset to the Sith Empire, it was the only thing holding it together. One man's death collapsed a civilization. That's not leadership. That's gravity. But if Ragnos proved that sheer willpower could hold an empire together, the next Sith on this list proved it could hold a broken body together indefinitely. Darth Sion. Most Sith Lords cheat death through rituals, holocrons, or essence transfer. Darth Sion just refused. His body is literally falling apart, held together by nothing but hatred and the dark side of the Force, and he cannot die. That's it. That's the whole method. No ancient technique, no technology. Just a man too angry to stop existing existing. Sion was a Sith marauder during the Great Sith War who suffered injuries so catastrophic that his body should have failed completely. Instead of accepting death, he embraced the agony, channeling every ounce of pain and hatred into a dark side connection powerful enough to override biological death itself. His flesh cracked, his bones shattered, his skin turned gray and split open like dried earth, and he kept going. They called him the Lord of Pain because suffering was literally his fuel source. The more his body deteriorated, the stronger his connection to the dark side became. It was a feedback loop with no off switch. Pain feeds hatred, hatred feeds the Force holds the body together, the body continues to decay, decay causes more pain, forever. He served alongside Darth Nihilus and Darth Traya in the Sith Triumvirate, placing his power among the most formidable in the post-Malak era. But here's the thing, Sion wasn't defeated through superior Force power or a better lightsaber technique. The Jedi exile Mitra Surik talked him into dying. She convinced him that his endless suffering wasn't strength, it was weakness. And Sion, after decades of agony, agreed. He let go. But if Sion's body horror disturbs you, wait until you meet the thing that made him look functional by comparison. Darth Nihilus. Up until now, we've been talking about Sith Lords. Powerful ones, terrifying ones, but still people with plans and goals and something resembling a personality. Nihilus is not that. Nihilus is a natural disaster wearing a mask. He started as a man. We know that much. He was caught in the activation of the mass shadow generator on Malachor 5, a super weapon that tore a wound in the Force itself. That wound didn't just hurt him, it fractured his soul and turned him into something parasitic, a thing that needed to consume life force energy just to keep existing, and the hunger never stopped. It only got worse. His Force drain didn't work like normal Sith abilities. It operated on a planetary scale. Nihilus could descend on a world and strip every living thing on it of its life force, leaving behind a silent, dead husk, an entire planet just gone. And every time he fed, the craving intensified. Eventually, the hunger wasn't something he had. It was something he was. It controlled him completely. He didn't even communicate like a person anymore. He spoke in this haunting, unintelligible language that bypassed sound entirely and touched victims' minds directly. His physical body was decaying around him while his consciousness projected outward through the Force, existing beyond flesh in a way that made his actual form almost irrelevant. When he was finally destroyed at Telos 4, his essence collapsed. All that remained were his robes, his lightsaber, and that mask. But here's the thing. The mask wasn't just a relic, it functioned as a nexus of dark side corruption so profound that wearing it invited the exact same consuming fate. His hunger was tattooed into the Force itself, like a scar that refused to heal. But if a planet-eating void sounds like the ceiling of Sith horror, you haven't met the one who performed the same trick with full conscious intent. Darth Vitiate. Every Sith Lord we've talked about so far had a limit, a weakness, a moment where the galaxy could breathe. Vitiate didn't have one. Born Tenebrae in 5113 BBY as the illegitimate son of Sith Lord Dramath, this kid was torturing and massacring thousands on his homeworld by the age of 10 years old. Most children are figuring out how to tie their shoes. Tenebrae was figuring out how to break an entire planet's will, and he was just getting started. See, if Darth Nihilus was a hurricane, mindless, consuming, unstoppable, then Vitiate was that same hurricane, except it had a 1500-year plan and a personal grudge against everything alive. He didn't just consume, he strategized, he built empires, plural, he wore different names across different eras, Tenebrae, Sith Emperor, Immortal Emperor, Valkorion, each one a new mask for the same ancient intelligence pulling strings behind galactic affairs for over a millennium. But here's the thing that puts him above everyone else on this list. In 4999 BBY, Vitiate performed the ritual of Nathema. He mentally enslaved over 8,000 Sith Lords simultaneously. 8,000. Not soldiers, not civilians. Sith Lords. He bent every single one of them to his will, absorbed their collective strength, and channeled it through a 10-day ceremony that froze an entire planet in dark side sorcery. When it was over, every living thing on Nathema's surface was dead. The Force itself had been ripped from the planet like someone tearing a page out of reality. What remained was a permanent wound, a place where the Force simply didn't exist anymore. anymore. And Vitiate walked away immortal. That's not a Sith Lord. That's a force of nature with a 15th century attention span and zero intention of ever stopping. He didn't just want to rule the galaxy. He wanted to consume it, rebuild it, and consume it again. Every other Sith on this list reached for power. Vitiate reached for everything, and for over 1,000 years, nobody could stop him. Every Sith Lord has a signature move, but some of these abilities are so broken, so terrifyingly overpowered, they make the Force itself look like a party trick. Today I'm breaking down the signature ability of every major Sith Lord, from pure combat monsters to literal gods, starting with the one who barely needed the Force at all. Darth Maul, Teräs Käsi, and Saberstaff Mastery. Here's the thing about Darth Maul. Every other Sith on this list has some grand philosophy, some ancient ritual, some cosmic power that bends reality. Maul has none of that. He's a weapon. Sidious took him as a child and trained him not as a successor, not as a thinker, but as a personal assassin shaped entirely around one purpose: killing things extremely well. His signature ability was Teräs Käsi, an ancient Force-infused martial art that emphasized kicks, throws, and hand-to-hand combat way beyond standard lightsaber technique. Pair that with a double-bladed saber nobody had used since ancient Sith eras, and you've got a guy who could engage multiple Jedi simultaneously while looking like a blender made of light. But the real proof? He got cut in half and came back. Where other Sith survived through dark rituals, Maul survived on pure hatred and the refusal to stop fighting, which is, not ideal for everyone else. No manipulation, no scheming, no cosmic horror, just violence perfected into an art form. But if you think raw fighting ability is impressive, wait until you see what happens when a Sith Lord picks up a fencing manual. Darth Tyrannus, Makashi Precision. Count Dooku was trained by Yoda. Let that sink in. He achieved the rank of Jedi Master, had the entire Jedi technical arsenal at his fingertips, and then walked away from all of it to become a Sith Lord. Which means when he showed up swinging a lightsaber, he wasn't just dangerous. He was dangerous with credentials. His signature was Makashi, the second form of lightsaber combat, an elegant, precise style built specifically for one-on-one dueling, basically fencing with a laser sword. By Dooku's era, almost nobody in the Jedi Order bothered with it anymore. They'd moved on to forms better suited for blaster deflection. Dooku reviving Makashi was a deliberate statement. He wasn't picking a fighting style, he was picking a philosophy. Even his curved lightsaber hilt wasn't vanity. The design enhanced Makashi's precision cuts and thrusts. Every movement in a duel looked like a chess grandmaster moving pieces across a board. Here's the thing though. Despite decades of mastery, despite training under the greatest Jedi who ever lived, he got his hands cut off by a 22-year-old running on rage. Anakin overwhelmed him in Revenge of the Sith, proving that surgical precision has a ceiling, and that ceiling is a supernaturally gifted maniac who refuses to stop swinging. The man orchestrated a galactic war that killed millions, yet genuinely saw himself as a gentleman, which is, not ideal. But if Tyrannus represents elegance taken to its limit, the next Sith proves what happens when raw power has zero elegance at all. Darth Vader, telekinetic force choke. Every other Sith on this list developed some exotic, complicated ability that requires a paragraph just to explain. Vader perfected choking people with his mind. That's it. That's the signature move. And somehow it became the most feared power in the entire galaxy. Here's the thing about Vader's force choke. It wasn't a combat technique, it was a management style. The man ran the Imperial Navy the way a particularly unhinged CEO runs a Fortune 500 company, except instead of firing you, he'd just close your windpipe from across the room. Admiral Ozzel, your strategy was suboptimal. You are now deceased. Standard quarterly review stuff. But what made it truly terrifying was the precision. Vader could modulate the intensity with surgical control, squeezing just enough to keep someone hovering at the edge of consciousness during an interrogation without actually killing them. He could also do it through a holographic transmission. Captain Nita learned that lesson the hard way. Imagine your boss calling you on a video screen and killing you through it, which is, not ideal. The real weapon was never the choke itself. It was what it did to everyone who witnessed it. Every officer in the Imperial fleet made decisions filtered through one question: will this get me choked? That kind of ambient terror doesn't require Vader to be in the room. It just requires him to exist. But if Vader's power was straightforward fear, his master took a very different approach to galactic domination. Darth Sidious, Force lightning and dark side clouds. Everybody knows Palpatine shoots lightning, That's the headline. That's the clip in every most powerful Sith compilation on the internet. And look, the lightning is genuinely terrifying. It could ragdoll a Jedi Master across a room, melt a lightsaber's ability to deflect it, and leave permanent scarring on anyone unlucky enough to survive. He made every other lightning user in the galaxy look like they were rubbing socks on carpet. But here's where it gets unsettling. The lightning was just the flashy part. Sidious had abilities that almost nobody talks about, and they're significantly worse. He was one of the most accomplished practitioners of Force concealment in Sith history. He sat in the same building as the entire Jedi Council for over a decade, radiated the dark side like a space heater, and not a single one of them sensed it. Yoda, Mace Windu. All of them walked right past him for years. He didn't just hide his presence, he actively clouded the Force itself, diminishing the Jedi's ability to see the future, sense danger, or trust their own instincts. The Jedi literally said their connection to the Force had been shrinking. The answer was sitting in the Chancellor's office the whole time. Most Sith can hurt you. Sidious could blind every Force user on the planet and make them doubt their own power without lifting a finger. He turned the Jedi's greatest weapon into a liability, which is, not ideal. The lightning destroys a person. The shroud destroyed an entire order. But if Sidious mastered hiding in plain sight, his master was busy manipulating life itself. Darth Plagueis, midi-chlorian manipulation. Every other Sith on this list mastered how to use the Force. Plagueis wanted to know what the Force actually is. Not philosophically, not spiritually, at a cellular level. He's the scientist on a roster full of warriors and sorcerers, and his research program might be the most terrifying thing any Sith ever attempted. While most darkside practitioners channeled their power through emotion, rage, instinct, Plagueis treated the Force like a biological system waiting to be reverse engineered. His obsession was midi-chlorians, the microscopic organisms living inside every cell of every living thing, responsible for Force sensitivity itself. He didn't just study them, he built secret laboratories dedicated to understanding how midi-chlorian concentration affected Force ability, life extension, and whether biological resurrection was even possible. And here's the thing, his results were apparently extraordinary. Plagueis reportedly cracked the code on death. Not metaphorically, he could allegedly extend lifespans indefinitely, prevent death through precise Force application, and theoretically create life itself by manipulating midi-chlorians directly. That's not a superpower. That's rewriting the operating system of the universe. His own body served as proof of concept. Plagueis survived over 100 years while maintaining full physical vigor, which is a pretty compelling data point for a guy claiming he'd solve mortality. The precise mechanisms stayed obscure, because of course they did. You don't publish your findings when your research subject is cheating death. But the universe apparently has opinions about people who try to hack its source code, because his own apprentice, Sidious, murdered him in his sleep. The one guy who figured out how to prevent death couldn't prevent his own. I don't know what to tell you. And if Plagueis was the Sith who understood the rules of the game, the next one literally rewrote them for every Sith who followed. Darth Bane, Orbalisk Armor and Essence Transfer. Darth Bane pursued immortality from two completely opposite directions at the same time, and honestly, both of them are horrifying. Direction 1, make the body indestructible. Orbalisks were living parasitic organisms that bonded directly to a Force user's flesh, forming a layer of biological armor that could resist lightsaber strikes, enhance physical strength, and turn the wearer into something closer to a tank than a person. The trade-off? They fed on your life force constantly, like wearing a suit made of leeches that also happened to be bulletproof. Most Force users who attempted the bonding process didn't survive it. Bane not only survived, he thrived in it. Direction 2. Make the body irrelevant. Bane obsessively studied essence transfer, the ability to rip your consciousness out of a dying body and force it into a new host. He spent years hunting down ancient Sith knowledge on the technique, and near the end of his life, he actually attempted it on his own apprentice, Zana. The idea of your master trying to literally hijack your body is unsettling enough. The fact that it nearly worked is worse. But here's the thing. Neither the parasite armor nor the immortality tricks are what made Bane the most consequential Sith Lord in history. His real signature move was an idea, the Rule of Two. Only 2 Sith at any time. one master, one apprentice. Every single Sith Lord who came after him on this list exists because of that philosophy. He didn't just master the dark side, he restructured it entirely. And if restructuring an entire religion sounds impressive, wait until you meet the Sith Lord who couldn't even decide which side of the Force he was on. Darth Revan, Force Storm, and Tactical Duality. Revan breaks the rules of this list. Every other Sith Lord on here has a signature ability you can point to and say that's the thing. Force Lightning, Force Drain, Essence Transfer. Revan's signature ability is essentially refusing to pick a side and getting stronger because of it. Let me explain. Yes, Force Storm is the flashy headline. The ability to generate massive, force-driven environmental phenomena, localized regions where conventional physics just stopped applying. Reality warping distortion fields with a destructive radius that made Force Lightning look like a party trick. That's impressive on its own, but here's where it gets interesting. Revan's real power was tactical duality. He functioned as a Jedi, then a Sith Lord, then a Jedi Knight again, then something else entirely. And at every single stage, he was terrifyingly effective. Most Force users commit to one philosophy and build their entire power structure around it. Revan looked at the Jedi-Sith binary and said, "No thanks, I'll take both." And the Force apparently rewarded him for it. His capacity to draw from both light and dark simultaneously generated power beyond what practitioners locked into a single framework could access. This wasn't inconsistency, it was sophistication. The man defeated Darth Malak aboard the Starforge, an ancient Rakatan factory that fed on dark side energy at planetary scales. You don't pull that off by being confused about your identity. You do that by understanding the Force at a level where the labels stop mattering. Revan was a philosopher general whose battlefield was reality itself, and the most unsettling implication of his existence is simple. The entire Jedi-Sith divide, the foundation of every conflict in this franchise, might itself be the limitation. But if Revan proved you could transcend death through philosophy, the next Sith Lord proved you could transcend it through something far worse. Pure, unrelenting agony. Darth Sion, eternal pain and resurrection. Most Sith Lords cheat death through some elegant ritual or ancient technique. Sion just said no. That's it. He died, and then he simply refused to accept the outcome. And then he did it again, and again, and again, each time coming back uglier, angrier, and somehow more powerful than before. Here's the thing about Sion. His body was, by every medical and biological standard, a corpse. We're talking visible scars from burns, cuts, amputations, and wounds so severe that no living organism should be walking around with them. He looked like someone had taken a person apart and then reassembled them wrong, multiple times, because that's basically what happened. His entire physical existence was held together by the dark side, the way duct tape holds together a car that should have been scrapped 6 accidents ago. But he wasn't just surviving, he was fighting, effectively. This walking collection of scar tissue and spite could hold his own in combat against trained Force users, which is the part that really breaks your brain. The pain never stopped, not for a second. He existed in permanent, screaming agony, and instead of letting that destroy him, he turned it into fuel. Every nerve-ending firing was another battery feeding his connection to the dark side. The philosophical inversion here is genuinely disturbing. Normal beings avoid pain to survive. Sion needed pain to survive. He weaponized suffering itself, turning dying into a renewable resource. Every death made him stronger, every wound deepened his power. Whether that represents true mastery of the dark side or just the galaxy's most stubborn man refusing to read the room is honestly up for debate. What isn't up for debate is how unsettling it is. No lightning, no rituals, no cosmic manipulation, just a broken body fueled by pure refusal. But if you think a man who can't die is disturbing, wait until you meet the one who makes sure nothing else can live. Darth Nihilus, Force Drain, and Essence Consumption. Up until this point, every Sith Lord on this list has been a person who uses a power. Nihilus isn't that. Nihilus is what happens when the power uses the person. He stopped being a man at some point and became something closer to a natural disaster wearing a mask. His signature ability was Force Drain, but calling it that feels like calling a supernova a bit warm. Every other Force user who drained life force did it to individual targets, maybe a room full of people if they were really pushing it. Nihilus did it to a planet, the entire planet Qatar, every living creature, every Force-sensitive individual, every organism down to the microbiological level, consumed in a single event. The whole world went from thriving civilization to lifeless void in moments. Not a battle, not a siege, just silence. Here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. The life force he consumed didn't transfer somewhere else. It didn't redistribute into the Force or pass into some cosmic recycling bin. It stopped existing permanently. He was essentially a black hole for life itself, creating permanent dead zones in the Force wherever he fed. That's not a power. That's entropy with a lightsaber. And the hunger was never satisfied. It couldn't be. Nihilus existed in a state of perpetual starvation, always needing to consume more, always escalating. His crew spent their entire existence hunting for new concentrations of Force-sensitive beings to feed him, like some kind of galaxy-spanning meal delivery service for an eldritch horror. The hunger wasn't something he controlled. It was autonomous, self-escalating, and fundamentally what he was, not a Sith Lord with an appetite. An appetite that happened to still be shaped like a Sith Lord. But if you think a walking extinction event is the ceiling for Sith power, Vitiate looked at planetary consumption and said, that's cute. Darth, Vitiate, planet-wide rituals. Every Sith Lord on this list wielded power that could reshape a battlefield, a government, or even the boundary between life and death. Vitiate looked at all of that and decided to think bigger, specifically planet-sized bigger. His most infamous act was a single dark side ritual performed on the planet Nathema. One ceremony, one sustained, coordinated channeling of dark side energy through 8,000 Sith Lords, feeding power into a connected ritual framework. And when it was finished, every living thing on the planet was dead. Millions of people wiped out in a single act. Not conquered, not enslaved, consumed. The planet itself was left a barren husk so thoroughly drained that the Force simply didn't exist there anymore. Nathema became a wound in reality, a place where even standing on the surface felt fundamentally wrong, like the universe had a hole punched through it. Here's the thing about Vitiate. His power wasn't a technique. It wasn't something he could just do on a Tuesday afternoon. It was infrastructure. His rituals required massive preparation, thousands of Sith Lords channeling energy through him, and sustained concentration across time frames that would make most Darkside users lose interest and go force choke somebody. This was engineered apocalypse, and he didn't stop at destruction. Vitiate achieved immortality through that same ritual on Nathema, then sustained it by transferring his essence into host bodies he called voices, puppeting them like he was swapping shirts. He had functionally transcended biological limitation entirely. Death wasn't a threat to him. It was an inconvenience. Every other Sith on this list wielded power. Vitiate rewrote the rules that power operates under. He turned the dark side into a planetary superweapon, the most complete inversion of everything the Jedi believed in that Sith lore has ever produced. And honestly, I don't know what to tell you. Some guys just take it too far. The Sith have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of creating monsters, from pain rituals that rewire the brain to ancient sorcery that bends reality itself. Every training method is designed to strip away everything human and replace it with pure, concentrated power. Today I'm breaking down all of them, and it starts with the one rule that made everything else possible, the rule of two, the master and apprentice. It sounds like a limitation. 2 Sith in an entire galaxy of Force users, a master and an apprentice. On the surface, that's the worst strategy imaginable. But here's the thing. It's actually the most elegant power concentrating mechanism in all of Star Wars. Darth Bane established the rule of two roughly 1,000 years before the prequels because the Sith kept destroying themselves. Every time they built an order with hundreds of practitioners, the whole thing collapsed into backstabbing and civil war. Bane's solution was brutal simplicity. 2. That's all we get. One master who embodies the dark side, one apprentice who craves it, and the master has to teach the apprentice everything they know, which means they're literally training the person who's gonna kill them. That's not a flaw, that's the design. Each successive master inherits the accumulated knowledge of every master before them, compounding power across 1,000 years of unbroken tradition. Every training method we're about to cover exists within this framework. The rule of two isn't just a training method, it's the philosophical backbone that makes every other one possible, but philosophy only gets you so far. At some point, you need to prove you can actually fight, which brings us to the trial that separates Sith who talk about power from Sith who take it. The trial of skill, lightsaber mastery. Sith lightsaber philosophy can be summed up in 3 words: attack, attack, attack. Where the Jedi teach measured defense, patience, and waiting for your opponent to make a mistake, the Sith teach you to never give them the chance. Every strike is meant to overwhelm. Every movement is designed to seize initiative and keep it. Minimal defensive posturing, maximum aggression. You don't block, you make them block. And the proof of concept? Darth Maul on Naboo. 1 Sith apprentice, 2 Jedi, and he held his ground against both of them simultaneously. That's not luck, that's training. Here's the thing, the training itself was basically designed to kill you. Apprentices fought multiple opponents at once, dueled against holographic enemies, programmed to adapt and counter their specific techniques, and sparred under deliberately compromised conditions like zero visibility or environmental hazards that could crush you if you lost focus for half a second. Your final exam was literally trying to kill your teacher. This created a natural selection problem that the Sith considered a feature, not a bug. Mistakes in lightsaber training didn't get you a bad grade, they got you a missing limb. Or worse, so only the genuinely talented survived to the next level, which is, not ideal for enrollment numbers, but extremely effective for producing killers. But if you think swinging a laser sword is brutal, wait until you hear what the Sith did to your body when they put the weapon down. The ordeal of the flesh. Pain tolerance. Darth Vader is in constant, unrelenting agony every single second of every single day. His suit pinches nerve endings. His respirator forces air into scarred lungs. His prosthetic limbs send phantom pain signals that never stop. And here's the thing, that's not a bug, it's a feature. Palpatine designed it that way. He deliberately made Vader's life support system more painful than it needed to be, because Sith philosophy operates on one core principle: suffering makes you stronger. Pain generates rage. Rage deepens your connection to the dark side, and the dark side feeds on all of it. It's a beautiful little cycle if you're a psychopath, but Vader's just the most famous example. Physical suffering has been baked into Sith training for as long as the Sith have existed. In the old expanded universe, apprentices were subjected to brutal endurance trials on harsh worlds, exposed to extreme environments, and forced to push past every physical limit imaginable. Some masters deliberately wounded their students, not to kill them, but to teach them to channel agony into power. Legends material describes tortures that would make a medieval dungeon look like a spa day. The worst part? Certain techniques required the apprentice to use the dark side to sustain themselves through injuries that should have killed them. Break, survive, break again, survive again. Each cycle expanding their capability a little more. It's the moment Sith training stops being about learning skills and starts being about fundamentally rewiring your relationship with your own body. But if pain reshapes the body, the next method goes after something far harder to rebuild. The trial of spirit, confronting the dark side. You remember the cave on Dagobah. Luke walks in, sees Vader, cuts his head off, and the mask cracks open to reveal his own face. That's the Jedi version of a spiritual trial. You confront your darkness and resist it. The Sith version is the exact opposite. You don't resist it. You let it in completely. The trial of spirit is the most abstract and genuinely eerie method on this list. It's not about combat or pain tolerance. It's about sitting alone with the worst parts of yourself, your deepest fears, your shame, your capacity for cruelty, and instead of fighting them, you open the door and invite them to stay permanently. Legends materials describe apprentices being sent to locations of ancient Sith trauma, battlefields where thousands died, tombs where dark side energy had been pooling for centuries. The proximity to these sites could trigger visions and psychological confrontations that no meditation technique could replicate. You weren't just thinking about your darkness, you were drowning in it. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. The goal isn't to understand the dark side or control it. The goal is complete integration. The apprentice reaches a point where they can no longer distinguish between their own desires and the desires of the dark side itself. Their previous identity gets dissolved and rebuilt with the dark side as the organizing principle. It stops being something you use. It becomes something you are, which is, not ideal. But if losing your identity to an ancient cosmic force sounds bad, wait until you hear about the Sith Lord who decided the entire philosophy needed a rewrite. The Rule of One, Darth Krayt's vision. About 130 years after the fall fall of the Empire, a Sith Lord named Darth Krayt looked at the Rule of Two and basically said, "This is stupid." And honestly, his argument was pretty compelling. Here's the thing. The Rule of Two is designed to destroy itself. Every generation, the apprentice kills the master. That's the whole point. Bane built an organization where the succession plan is literally assassination. Krayt's critique was simple. Why build a system that's at its weakest every time leadership changes hands? Every transition is a vulnerability. Every dead master is a gap in institutional knowledge. So Krayt proposed something radical. One Supreme Sith Lord at the top. Not two, one. Everyone else, every dark side practitioner, every warrior, every priest, serves within a structured hierarchy beneath that single authority. No plotting, no succession through murder, just organized collective power directed by one vision. Training looked completely different. Instead of one master pouring everything into one apprentice and hoping they stabbed them at the right time, Krayt's order used standardized curricula, formal testing, and institutional frameworks. Think less ancient wizard mentorship and more military academy with Force Lightning electives. Consistency over individual brilliance. Reliable soldiers over unpredictable prodigies. The philosophical tension here is genuinely fascinating. Bane believed competition and betrayal refined the Sith into their strongest possible form. Krayt believed that same competition was bleeding them dry. One valued individual power above everything. The other valued what that power could accomplish when organized. But if you think philosophical disagreements between Sith Lords sound intense, wait until you see how they settled things at the Academy on Korriban. The Korriban Academy trials, the competitive survival. Every other Sith training method we've talked about has one thing in common: a master carefully cultivating a single student. Korriban threw that entire concept into a meat grinder. The Sith Academy on Korriban was basically the Hunger Games with lightsabers. Dozens of apprentices trained simultaneously, and the graduation requirement was simple: be the last one breathing. This wasn't a school, it was a filtration system designed to find the one person worth keeping, and it used your classmates' corpses as the filter. The trials operated in progressive tiers, and each tier got worse. Initial trials tested basic force capability and combat skills where failure meant defeat. Painful, humiliating, but survivable. Intermediate trials introduced lethal combat in arenas where your opponent's explicit goal was to kill you. And the advanced trials? Those tested whether you'd betray your allies or violate every personal taboo you had left just to win. The Academy didn't just want to know if you were strong, it wanted to know if you were broken enough. Old Republic-era materials describe Sith assassin droids hunting apprentices through dangerous environments and ritual combat where victory gave you tactical advantages over your remaining rivals. Every element was designed to create institutional Darwinism. A bench of highly trained killers existed at all times, ready to step into leadership if the current master and apprentice got themselves destroyed, which happened a lot, and Korriban itself made everything worse. The ancient Sith homeworld was soaked in dark side energy, a desert wasteland filled with tombs of dead Sith lords whose presence could drive weaker minds insane. The planet was actively trying to break you, but if you think surviving a Death Academy sounds rough, wait until you hear about the trial where your own master shoots lightning at you until you either learn to take it or stop existing. Force Lightning Initiation, the elemental power. Learning. Force Lightning is probably the most insane skill acquisition on this entire list, because the foundation isn't some calm meditation exercise, it's rage. You have to channel the dark side through your body with enough intensity and hatred to physically manifest it as electrical energy pouring out of your fingertips. And if you can't maintain control over that kind of raw power while it's literally coursing through you, you don't get a bad grade. You get an uncontrolled discharge that kills you, which is, not ideal, but the payoff is one of the most devastating weapons in the entire Sith arsenal. Nobody showcases that better than Palpatine. In Revenge of the Sith, he's throwing lightning around during his fight with Mace Windu, and it's effective. But fast forward to Return of the Jedi, and the guy is filling an entire throne room with sustained electrical output while barely breaking a sweat. Decades of refinement turned an already terrifying ability into something almost incomprehensible in scale. Here's where it gets really interesting though. Advanced practitioners didn't just throw bolts. They could focus lightning into into precision strikes, spread it as a wide area discharge, charge objects, create electrical barriers, or even supercharge their own bodies for bursts of enhanced speed. It's not just a weapon, it's an entire combat system, but the part that makes Force lightning truly Sith, the psychological damage. Palpatine's torture of Luke wasn't just about hurting him physically. Every second of that lightning was designed to overwhelm his mind, to drown him in pain until hope itself felt impossible. Force lightning doesn't just destroy your body, it breaks your spirit. But if raw elemental destruction sounds dangerous, wait until you hear what happens when the Sith start rewriting the laws of nature itself. Sith alchemy and sorcery, the twisted arts. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? That single line from Palpatine is one of the most iconic moments in the entire franchise. And what he describes, a Sith Lord who could manipulate midi-chlorians to create life and prevent death, that's not just a cool story he's telling Anakin, that's Sith alchemy, the training method that even other Sith found genuinely disturbing. Here's the thing, everything else on this list deals with combat, mental toughness, psychological warfare. Sith alchemy leaves all of that behind and enters something closer to straight-up horror. We're talking about the manipulation of matter, life force, and fundamental reality through rituals that blur the line between science and magic so completely that the distinction stops meaning anything. In Legends materials, Sith alchemists could create twisted servant beasts by fusing multiple species together into monstrosities that shouldn't exist. They crafted enchanted artifacts capable of storing ancient knowledge or granting supernatural abilities. And the big one, the goal that drove the most ambitious practitioners absolutely insane, was immortality, splitting consciousness across multiple vessels, binding your essence to objects or locations, cheating death itself. But you didn't just wake up one morning and start creating abominations. Training in Sith alchemy required years of theoretical study before you even attempted your first working, memorizing ritualistic procedures, understanding esoteric theory that reads like a nightmare textbook. Get it wrong, and you didn't just fail. You created something you couldn't control, or worse, you became the experiment. This is power on a completely different scale. Not, I can beat you in a fight power. I can rewrite what you are at a molecular level power, which is, not ideal. But if the idea of someone reshaping your body terrifies you, wait until you hear what the Sith could do to your mind. The breaking of the will, mental domination. This is arguably the most evil thing on this entire list. Every other method involves doing something terrible to the apprentice. This one is about doing something terrible to everyone else. The breaking of the will is the Sith's training in mental domination, the ability to reach into another person's mind and make it yours. And the best example of it in action doesn't even involve the Force. Palpatine's manipulation of Anakin across episodes 2 and 3 is a masterclass in psychological destruction. He identified every vulnerability Anakin had: the fear of losing Padme, the resentment toward the Jedi Council, the desperate need for a father figure who actually trusted him. Then he exploited every one of those pressure points across years, slowly steering Anakin toward choices that served his agenda while making Anakin believe they were his own decisions. That's the terrifying part. Anakin wasn't forced. He chose. He just didn't realize the choices were designed for him. Now, the actual Force-based training and mental domination follows a progression that gets worse the further you go. It starts crude. Overt mental commands that override conscious thought, basically forcing someone to act against their will. Blunt, effective, but obvious. The target knows something happened. The intermediate level is where it gets unsettling. Subtle manipulation, where the target doesn't even recognize they're being influenced. Implanting suggestions, reshaping emotional responses, making certain decisions feel natural when they're anything but. But the most advanced form described in Legends materials is genuinely nightmarish, completely rewriting a target's personality, their values, their beliefs, until they become a functionally different person. Not, I can make you do something. I can make you want to do something. The victim doesn't resist because the person who would have said no doesn't exist anymore, which is, not ideal. But if the idea of having your entire identity erased sounds bad, wait until you hear what the Sith demand their apprentices destroy with their own hands. The sacrifice, the final severing of ties. Every method on this list, the pain conditioning, the mental domination, the alchemy, the trials, all of it was building toward one single moment. The moment the apprentice kills who they used to be. The sacrifice is the final test, not of strength, not of skill, of commitment so absolute that the person who walks out the other other side literally cannot go back. The apprentice must destroy everything connecting them to their previous life. Family, friends, values, identity, all of it burned by their own hand. Anakin Skywalker is the definitive example. When he marches into the Jedi Temple, he doesn't just betray the Order, he murders children he personally knew. He force chokes Padme, the one person he supposedly did all of this to save. In a single night, every meaningful connection Anakin Skywalker ever had is severed, not by accident, by choice. And that's the point. Legends materials take it even further. Some apprentices were required to murder their own families. Others underwent rituals called death before death, where the previous self is ceremonially killed and a new dark side identity resurrects in the same body, which is, not ideal. But here's what makes the sacrifice the most terrifying method on this list. It's not the acts themselves, it's what happens after. Once you've committed atrocities that irreversible, your brain has exactly two options: collapse under the weight of what you've done, or double down on the ideology that justifies it. The Sith are betting everything on option 2. And they're almost always right. Every future act of cruelty becomes easier because admitting the first one was wrong means admitting they destroyed their entire life for nothing. So they rationalize, they commit further, they become exactly what the Sith needed them to be. That's the Sith's greatest achievement. Not the lightning, not the alchemy. It's creating a person who burned every bridge with their own hands and convinced themselves it was transcendence. By the time they realize the truth, if they ever do, there's nothing left of the person who could have walked away. The Jedi Order has survived for 25,000 years, but the Sith came horrifyingly close to destroying them multiple times throughout history. From ancient wars that killed hundreds of Jedi in single battles to thousand-year shadow conspiracies that dismantled them from within, the Sith perfected the art of Jedi elimination. Today, we're breaking down every major Sith plot that nearly wiped out the Guardians of the Galaxy, starting with the one that established the blueprint for everything that followed. The Great Sith War kicked off in 3996 BBY when Exar Kun declared open warfare against the entire Galactic Republic, mobilizing his Sith forces from Yavin 4. Kun's Brotherhood pulled thousands of Dark Jedi and Sith warriors into coordinated assaults on multiple Republic worlds simultaneously, the kind of overwhelming force that makes you wonder why the Jedi didn't just pack up and leave. But here's where it gets brutal. The Brotherhood deployed Sith battle meditation and dark side rituals that corrupted entire Jedi enclaves, turning masters and Padawans against each other in bloodbaths where nobody knew who the enemy was anymore. The Jedi expected conventional warfare. Instead, the Sith used alchemy to mutate creatures into biological weapons and corrupted Jedi through artifacts that poisoned their connection to the light side. The catastrophic toll kept climbing. Ossus, one of the most important Jedi strongholds in the galaxy, got completely annihilated when Kun triggered a supernova using ancient Sith superweapons. Entire libraries of Jedi knowledge and hundreds of Jedi got vaporized because one guy found a weapon he shouldn't have been allowed to touch. And here's the kicker. Ulic Qel-Droma, a fallen Jedi who joined Kun, had insider knowledge of every Jedi defense, every stronghold location, every vulnerable point in their entire network. The Jedi were fighting a war where the enemy knew exactly where to strike because he'd spent years training in those very temples. This was the moment the Sith figured out that turning the Jedi's own people against them beats direct confrontation every single time. But if you think one corrupted Jedi Master is horrifying, wait until you hear about the Sith triumvirate consuming entire planets of Force users in a single feeding frenzy, the first Jedi Purge, the Sith Triumvirate. The Jedi thought they'd survived the worst after Revan fell. They were wrong. Between 3956 and 3951 BBY, 3 Sith Lords systematically dismantled what remained of the Jedi Order using methods that made open warfare look merciful. Darth Traya, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Sion, the Sith Triumvirate, didn't just kill Jedi. They hunted them like animals, turned their own beliefs against them, and proved that psychological warfare beats lightsabers every single time. Here's how it worked. Traya branded every Jedi who served under Revan as tainted by the dark side, giving the galaxy a convenient excuse to let them die. She posed as a Jedi scholar named Kreia, infiltrated the council, and ran fabricated meditation sessions where traumatized Jedi confessed their locations. Then she sent Sion and Nihilus to finish them. Darth Sion personally assassinated eliminated 47 Jedi Masters hiding in the unknown regions. The darkly poetic part? He killed them with their own lightsabers to make it look like infighting, fracturing what little trust remained in the Order. Nobody suspected a Sith was even involved, but Nihilus was the nightmare. In 3954 BBY, he showed up at the Qatar Enclave, where 300 Jedi had gathered for an emergency council. He consumed them, all of them, instantly, through pure force drain. The only survivor was Mitra Surik, and she only lived because she arrived late. By the time this purge ended, the Jedi Council had been reduced to a single member before Qatar's destruction eliminated him too. The Triumvirate proved something the Sith had been learning for centuries. You don't need armies when you can manipulate, infiltrate, and drain. But if you think that's horrifying, the next plan makes Nihilus look restrained, because at least he killed people one planet at a time. The Bomb of Ruin, the Thought Bomb. The Sith built a weapon that required dozens of dark side practitioners channeling energy into a single point to annihilate everything in the blast radius. And yes, they were stupid enough to use it. The Thought Bomb was developed during the New Sith Wars, a 1,000-year conflict where the Sith kept losing because they couldn't stop backstabbing each other long enough to actually win. The Brotherhood of Darkness figured the solution was a super weapon so devastating it would wipe out the entire Jedi Order in one shot. The catch? You needed multiple Sith Lords standing together, pouring their life force into a containment field for an extended ritual. Get the timing wrong, and the whole thing becomes catastrophically unstable. In 1000 BBY, Sith Lord Scare Khan lured the Jedi Army of Light into a final confrontation on Ruusan. What the Jedi didn't know was that Khan had prepared the Thought Bomb as a last resort. When the battle turned against the Brotherhood, Khan initiated the detonation. The ritual required the Brotherhood's leadership to sacrifice themselves. The bomb consumed Sith and Jedi alike in an instantaneous implosion that vaporized all Force-sensitive beings caught in the blast. Entire battalions of Jedi and Sith perished in the catastrophic feedback. The blast created a permanent wound in the Force, trapping the souls of everyone killed in an eternal prison of torment. Here's the thing. The Thought Bomb killed nearly as many Sith as Jedi. The Brotherhood of Darkness sacrificed their entire command structure to use it. Strategic genius. Master Valentine Farfalla survived, arriving too late to prevent the detonation. One Sith also walked away from Ruusan with a very different philosophy about how the Sith should operate, and his plan would actually work. The Rule of Two, the Shadow Plan. Darth Bane looked at the smoking ruins of Ruusan, saw 100 Sith Lords and nearly 200 Jedi vaporized by the Thought Bomb, and had the most psychopathic epiphany in galactic history. What if we just stopped existing? And I can prove it worked better than any war ever could. In 1000 BBY, Bane established the Rule of Two, a doctrine mandating exactly 2 Sith, Master and Apprentice, should exist at any given time. The plan required centuries of calculated invisibility before attempting galactic conquest. Not decades, not when we feel ready, generations of patience, while the Jedi forgot the Sith were real. The patience alone is insane, but here's where it gets brilliant. The Rule of Two wasn't just hiding, it was a meat grinder that forced every Sith to be stronger than their master or die trying. Bane's own apprentice, Xana, had to prove herself worthy through constant trials and assassination attempts during her training. Every generation, the survivor became more dangerous than the last, while the Jedi assumed they'd won. The result speaks for itself. During the New Sith Wars, the Jedi actively hunted Sith across the galaxy. By the time of the prequels, the Jedi Council genuinely believed the Sith had been extinct for a millennium. They went from, "We're fighting Sith right now," to "Sith our ancient history our archives barely mention." The lineage continued unbroken from Bane to Sidious across 1,000 years. Bane to Xana, Xana to Cognis, Cognis to Millennial, down through Tenebris, Plagueis, and finally Palpatine. An unbroken chain of masters who successfully turned galactic-scale revenge into an exact science. But the absolute masterpiece was how they weaponized Jedi complacency against itself. The Sith became legends, then myths, then forgotten completely. The Jedi stopped looking for threats they believed no longer existed. By the time they sensed the dark side rising again, it was already too late. If you think invisible Sith Lords sound dangerous, the Stark Hyperspace War proved they could manufacture entire conflicts just to test their strategy. The Stark Hyperspace War, the prelude. The Stark Hyperspace War doesn't get enough credit for being one of the most successful Sith test runs in history. In 44 BBY, Darth Tenebris looked at the Republic and thought, what if we just funded terrorists to kill Jedi Jedi for us, and it worked horrifyingly well. Here's the thing. The Star Commercial Combine wasn't just some random pirate gang. They deployed 300 modified freighters with ionic pulse cannons specifically designed to disable Jedi starfighters. Military-grade weapons platforms funded by Sith money, and the Jedi walked right into it. Master Plo Koon's task force got absolutely shredded, 80% casualties. The Combine used fake distress signals to lure them into asteroid fields rigged with explosives, and the Jedi, being Jedi, responded to every single distress call because that's what they do. Tenebris knew exactly how to exploit that compassion. Send out a cry for help, wait for the Jedi to show up, blow them to pieces. 53 Jedi Knights died trying to mediate this conflict. Multiple masters were critically wounded, and several were ambushed during what should have been peaceful negotiations. The whole thing was a masterclass in exploiting Jedi protocol, and here's where it gets truly diabolical. Tenebris posed as a Republic Defense Committee advisor who specifically recommended deploying Jedi negotiators to resolve the crisis. He sent them into kill zones while pretending to help. This was the Shadow Plan in full effect. One Sith Lord playing both sides, orchestrating Jedi deaths while sitting on the committee meant to protect them, and the Jedi suspected nothing. The 80% casualty rate proves one thing. Even this close to the Clone Wars, the Jedi still hadn't learned to suspect betrayal. They walked into traps, assuming good faith, because their entire philosophy demanded it. Tenebris took notes on every single weakness this conflict exposed. Fake distress signals work. Poisoned negotiation tactics work. Putting a Sith in an advisory role works. But if you think rigged asteroid fields were bad, wait until you hear about the Yinchori literally breaking into the Jedi Temple itself. The Yinchori Uprising. The Jedi Temple is supposed to be untouchable, the single safest place in the entire galaxy, defended by the greatest warriors who ever lived, sitting right on Coruscant under the Republic's nose. And in 33 BBY, it got breached anyway. Here's the thing. Darth Sidious didn't just orchestrate some distant conflict and hope it worked out. He weaponized an entire species. The Yinchori were already naturally aggressive and resistant to Force influence, which made them perfect candidates. Sidious fed them military intelligence and resources through intermediaries, turning their natural belligerence into organized warfare. This wasn't a standard military operation. This was deliberate escalation designed to test the Jedi's defenses. The Yinchori launched a coordinated assault across multiple systems, and while the Republic scrambled to respond, Yinchori warriors did something nobody thought was possible. They breached the Jedi Temple itself. Multiple Jedi were killed during the conflict, including Jedi Master Micah Giet and Neshan. The psychological impact alone was catastrophic. The one place Jedi were supposed to feel safe just proved it wasn't. But here's where Sidious's brilliance shows. The entire crisis forced the Jedi to spread themselves thin across multiple fronts simultaneously. Council members like Mace Windu had to personally lead strike teams to Yinchor itself while the temple remained vulnerable. Sidious was studying their response patterns, their deployment strategies, their weaknesses under pressure. He was collecting data, and the kicker? The whole uprising traced back to manipulations nobody could prove. There were whispers of outside influence, of resources the Yinchori shouldn't have had access to, but nothing concrete. Sidious had learned to operate through so many layers of intermediaries that even when the Jedi suspected Sith involvement, they couldn't confirm it. He was a ghost pulling strings they couldn't see. The uprising failed, obviously. The Jedi are hard to kill. But Sidious proved something far more valuable. He proved the temple could be violated. He proved Jedi could die on their home ground. And most importantly, he proved he could manipulate galactic events without leaving fingerprints. The Shadow Plan wasn't just sophisticated anymore. It was untraceable. But if breaching the temple sounds bad, wait until you see what happened when Sidious turned an entire planet into bait. The invasion of Naboo. This is the moment Darth Sidious stopped being a ghost in the machine and became the most powerful man in the galaxy. And he did it without firing a single shot himself. The blockade of Naboo wasn't about trade routes or taxation disputes. It was about creating a crisis big enough to topple Chancellor Valorum and install Palpatine in his place. Sidious orchestrated the entire conflict through his apprentice Darth Maul and his puppet Viceroy Gunray, manufacturing a situation so dire the Senate would demand new leadership leadership. When Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi walked into that conference room on the Trade Federation flagship, they were walking into a deliberate ambush. Droidekas flooded the room, poison gas filled the ventilation system, and the Federation forces had one objective: kill the Jedi ambassadors before they could report back to Coruscant. The Jedi escaped, but barely. Sidious wanted them dead because witnesses complicated the plan. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council was receiving intelligence suggesting diplomatic resolution was possible. They believed it because they wanted to believe it, because peaceful solutions are what the Jedi do. While they debated whether to send more mediators, Sidious was already 3 moves ahead, preparing his Senate speech and lobbying for votes. The manufactured crisis worked exactly as designed. The Senate held a vote of no confidence against Chancellor Valorum. Palpatine delivered his nomination acceptance with perfect false humility, and the Jedi had been so focused on stopping a corporate invasion, they didn't realize they'd just handed the galaxy to a Sith Lord. The Trade Federation deployed a full droid army to invade a single peaceful planet, and the Jedi sent 2 ambassadors. That's the level of complacency Sidious exploited. He'd been positioning himself in the Senate for years, building alliances, gathering favors, waiting for the perfect moment to activate his network. But if you think one manufactured crisis to seize political power was the extent of Sidious's ambition, you haven't been paying attention, because this was just the setup. The real trap was still a decade away. The Clone Wars, the ultimate trap. The Clone Wars weren't just a conflict, they were the single greatest con job in galactic history. Darth Sidious didn't start a war. He built a 3-year death trap and convinced the Jedi to walk into it willingly, smile on their faces, sabers ignited, leading an army that would execute them the moment he gave the word. Here's the scale we're talking about: 3 years, thousands of star systems, countless battles across the Outer Rim to the core. The Jedi Order deployed as generals across the entire galaxy, commanding millions of clone troopers in active combat. Nearly all of the Order's operational focus went into prosecuting this war. That's not a distraction, that's total blindness. They stopped looking for Sith because they were too busy fighting separatists, and the separatists were run by a Sith Lord. Sidious played both sides, ensured the war never ended too quickly, and made absolutely certain the Jedi trusted their clones. And here's where it gets genuinely horrifying. Sidious didn't just let the war play out, he personally intervened in key battles to ensure Jedi victories. He made sure they won when it mattered, built their confidence in the clone army, made them believe these soldiers were loyal, all while every single clone trooper had an inhibitor chip embedded in their brain during the Kaminoan growth phases. Biological failsafes programmed to turn them into executioners on command. The Jedi trained with them, fought beside them, trusted them completely, and the entire time, millions of those clones were walking time bombs. Before Order 66 even dropped, the war had already devastated the Order. Jedi died on battlefields across the galaxy. The Battle of Coruscant alone saw multiple Jedi killed when General Grievous turned Palpatine's rescue into a killing ground. The Jedi thought they were saving the Chancellor. They were walking into an ambush designed by the man they were trying to save. It's almost poetic if it wasn't so completely fucked. But if you think the war itself was brutal, wait until you hear what happened the moment Sidious activated those chips. Order 66, 1,000 years of planning, thousands of battlefronts, one command, and in the time it takes to check your phone, the Jedi Order was functionally extinct. Order 66 executed on 19 BBY, and here's the scale we're talking about: thousands of Jedi dead within hours across simultaneous battlefronts spanning the entire galaxy. The Temple garrison got wiped out with clone battalions storming through every corridor before most Jedi even understood what was happening. Darth Vader personally walked through the temple and slaughtered everyone he found, including Jedi Masters, Knights, and younglings during the opening assault. Just him. And over the following days and weeks, clone legions mopped up Jedi across planetary sweeps galaxy-wide. This wasn't a battle. This was an extermination protocol with military efficiency that would make any general jealous. But here's where it gets surgical. Sidious triggered Order 66 the moment Anakin's fall was complete. The timing ensured 0 Jedi received advance warning. No Force visions, no emergency council meetings, no last-minute evacuations. The clones turned, and the Jedi died confused. Only a handful of Jedi survived the initial purge, and that's out of roughly 10,000. Most survivors were either isolated on remote missions or got lucky with clone units whose inhibitor chips malfunctioned. The survival rate was catastrophic, but here's the thing: some of those survivors weren't lucky at all. Sidious deliberately allowed Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda to discover his identity at the temple. He knew their Jedi morality would demand they confront him, that their need to face evil directly would override survival instincts. And he was right. Their shock, their disbelief, their emotional need to understand how this happened bought him the hours he needed to lock down Coruscant while clone battalions secured every exit. He weaponized their goodness. The Jedi's greatest strength became their final vulnerability. And if you think thousands of dead Jedi in one afternoon was brutal, the hunt that followed makes Order 66 look merciful. The Great Jedi Purge, the Inquisitorius. Order 66 killed hundreds of Jedi in a single day. But here's the thing, Palpatine wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted every single survivor hunted down, interrogated, and executed. So shortly after the Empire's formation, Darth Vader established the Inquisitorius, a cadre of former Jedi turned dark side hunters whose sole purpose was making extinction permanent. Between 19 BBY and the Battle of Yavin, these Inquisitors systematically eliminated Jedi survivors across the galaxy. The Grand Inquisitor personally killed multiple Jedi Masters, making him one of the most effective agents in the Purge. These weren't random encounters, they were coordinated extermination campaigns with Imperial resources backing every move. The Inquisitorius had unlimited funding, military support, and zero accountability. But the killing wasn't just physical. The Jedi Temple's archives were systematically looted and destroyed, with countless holocrons eliminated to erase Jedi knowledge. Every holocron contained centuries of Jedi philosophy, training techniques, and history. The Empire didn't just want Jedi dead, they wanted to erase the fact they ever existed. The brutality was relentless. Imperial forces hunted Jedi refugees across the Outer Rim, executing survivors in public displays meant to discourage Force-sensitive individuals from revealing themselves. The message was clear: there is no hiding, there is no mercy. Jedi who'd survived the Clone Wars died alone, hunted like animals, with their deaths broadcast as propaganda. The Inquisitorius deployed advanced tracking technology to locate Force sensitives. Imperial probe droids, informant networks, and dark side rituals turned Jedi hunting into a systematic process. The Empire had industrialized extinction, treating it like any other administrative function, with reports filed and operations coordinated through Imperial intelligence. But here's where it gets truly horrific. The Inquisitorius didn't just hunt, they used psychological warfare. They posed as Jedi survivors, sent forged transmissions, and created false safe havens. Imagine you're a Jedi who escaped Order 66. You've been alone for years, terrified, desperate for any sign that someone else made it out. Then you receive a transmission claiming other Jedi have gathered somewhere safe. Survivors responded to these traps and walked into execution chambers. The Empire weaponized their hope, their loyalty, their desperate need to believe they weren't the last ones left. That's psychological warfare at its most sadistic. Order 66 was the shock. The Inquisitorius was the sustained terror that followed. But if you think hunting down the survivors was brutal, wait until you hear about the Empire's plan to make sure Force sensitives never returned at all. Project Harvester. The Sith spent 1,000 years learning from their mistakes. Every time the Jedi rebuilt, they got smarter, faster, more cautious. So Sidious decided to solve the problem at its source. If you can't kill all the Jedi, make sure no one remembers how to become one. The Inquisitorius ran from 19 BBY through at least 4 BBY, and their mission was exactly as calculated as it sounds. Hunt down surviving Jedi, extract Force-sensitive children, turn them into weapons, or eliminate them as threats. The Empire didn't need to murder every Force-sensitive infant in the galaxy. They just needed to ensure none of them could rebuild the Order. They didn't announce their operations. They embedded themselves in Imperial governance. Inquisitors posed as administrators, healthcare officials, census workers. They monitored planetary records, tracked bloodlines, flagged families with Force-sensitive histories. When a target surfaced, recovery teams moved in quietly. Sometimes the child disappeared. Sometimes the whole family did. The Inquisitorius operated across the Outer Rim, Mid-Rim, and Core worlds simultaneously. They captured at least a dozen children, including Force-sensitive infants like Dara Leonis, who was abducted from Lothal and held at an Imperial training facility. Some were broken and trained as future Inquisitors. Some were killed when they proved unusable. Most just vanished into the Imperial machine. Over nearly 2 decades, the Inquisitorius systematically dismantled the possibility of the Order reforming. Every Force-sensitive bloodline they tracked, every child they took, every family that learned to hide their abilities out of fear. That's not just enforcement, that's cultural extinction. The Inquisitors themselves were former Jedi, captured and tortured into service. The Grand Inquisitor, the Fifth Brother, the Seventh Sister, Sidious turned the Order's survivors into the weapon that would ensure no new generation could rise. They knew Jedi training methods, Jedi hiding tactics, Jedi philosophy. They knew exactly where to look and how to break what they found. This wasn't the Sith being cruel for cruelty's sake. This was Sidious learning from every Sith who failed, because survivors rebuilt the Order. You can't leave the foundation intact. You dismantle the infrastructure, eliminate the teachers, and make sure the next generation never learns what a Jedi even was. But even this wasn't enough, because Sidious underestimated one thing. You can kill the Jedi, you can hunt their children, you can erase their history, but the Force itself doesn't die, and eventually someone always remembers. The final hunts. By 30 ABI, the Jedi Order was functionally extinct, but Darth Vader wasn't satisfied with functional extinction. He wanted absolute zero. Vader's post-Order 66 operations represented the most systematic extermination campaign in galactic history. Scattered survivors who'd escaped the initial purge found themselves hunted across every sector. Vader deployed Inquisitors, Purge troopers, and entire Imperial Star Destroyer battle groups to track down even rumors of Jedi activity. Fortified hideouts were obliterated. Safe houses were burned. Anyone who'd sheltered a Jedi disappeared. But here's where it gets personal. Master Kirak Infilla, a combat specialist who'd survived Order 66 by isolating himself on a barren moon, faced Vader in single combat. The duel was brutal and one-sided. Vader didn't just kill Infilla, he systematically dismantled every defensive technique the Master attempted, adapting in real time until Infilla had nowhere left to retreat. The fight ended with Vader taking Infilla's lightsaber and bleeding the Kyber crystal red, a deliberate desecration that turned the Jedi's own weapon into a Sith trophy. These operations included deception tactics Vader learned directly from Sidious. Imperial forces planted evidence linking Jedi survivors to terrorist attacks against civilian targets, fabricated intelligence reports, forged communications, even staged massacres designed to look like Jedi vengeance killings. It worked. Planetary governments that might have harbored fugitives instead turned them over for execution. The Sith were still weaponizing politics even in the Imperial era. Vader's hunts weren't just about killing Jedi, they were about erasing hope. When he destroyed a sanctuary, he made sure the locals knew why. When he executed a survivor, he broadcast it. The psychological warfare was deliberate. Make every remaining Jedi understand that resistance was futile, that help would never come, that they'd die alone in the dark. But the cruelty didn't end with death. Vader used Jedi survivors as bait, letting some escape just long enough to lead him to others. False sanctuaries were established and monitored. Coded messages were intercepted and traced. By the Battle of Yavin, known Jedi survivors numbered in the single digits across the entire galaxy. The Jedi Order at its height numbered 10,000. After Ruusan, after the Rule of Two, after the Clone Wars, after Order 66, after the Inquisitorius, after Vader's personal crusade, fewer than 10 remained. From the Great Sith War's opening salvos to Vader hunting down the last fugitives in the Outer Rim, every plot, every deception, every catastrophic toll had built toward this singular moment, the near complete extinction of the Jedi Order. The architects of ruin had won. Every Sith duel in Star Wars is secretly a psychological battlefield where blades are secondary and ego is the real weapon. Across 12 confrontations, these fights reshape the entire galaxy through arrogance, manipulation, and raw hatred. Today I'm breaking down every single one, starting with the aristocrat who proved raw power means absolutely nothing. Count Dooku versus Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, Geonosis. Count Dooku is the greatest living master of Form 2, Makashi, and that sentence alone should terrify you. Makashi is a dueling style optimized for precise blade work and probing tempo. It manipulates opponents psychologically, treating combat like a conversation where Dooku decides who speaks and when. The man fights like a fencer who already knows the match is over before it starts, which at Geonosis in 22 BBY it basically was. Anakin charges in with that legendary Skywalker aggression and Dooku dismantles him. Unceremoniously, slices off his right arm above the elbow. Just like that, the Chosen One gets his first cybernetic limb, symbolically beginning his transformation into a part-machine being. All that raw power, zero refinement. Dooku didn't even blink. But here's where it gets complicated. Right before the blades come out, Dooku straight up tells Obi-Wan that a Sith Lord controls the Senate. The truth of Sidious's manipulation served on a silver platter. Obi-Wan dismisses it completely. The Jedi's political blindness is so total that a Sith Lord literally confesses and they go, nah, lying. Anakin's brutal defeat foreshadows everything. The shame, the vulnerability, the realization that power without control is worthless. These are emotional wounds Palpatine will later exploit with surgical precision. But if you think one refined aristocrat was bad, wait until you meet the Zabrak who turned dueling into pure rage. Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Maul, Tatooine. This is the duel that broke the galaxy. Not because of the choreography, not because of the music, but because of what it permanently broke inside the Jedi Order. Specifically, Qui-Gon Jinn's chest cavity. Here's the thing. The fight in the Theed Power Complex isn't just two Jedi versus a Sith in face paint. It is the single most consequential lightsaber duel in Star Wars history, and nobody on screen realizes it. Darth Maul shows up wielding a double-bladed saber and Form 7 Juyo, the most aggressive, emotionally unhinged lightsaber form in existence. For 1,000 years, the Sith have been hiding in the shadows. Maul is their coming-out party, and he fights like it. Pure acrobatic brutality, spinning and flipping, overwhelming both Jedi at once to force them apart, which, you know, works perfectly. Then comes the red ray shield corridor. Qui-Gon and Maul get locked together in that narrow space, one-on-one, while Obi-Wan is trapped behind the barrier watching. Maul impales Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan snaps, attacks in a blind rage, gets kicked into a reactor shaft, and hangs from a nozzle. Maul could finish him. Instead, he paces. He sparks his blade. He toys with his prey. That overconfidence creates the opening for Obi-Wan to leap up, grab Qui-Gon's saber, and bisect Maul so thoroughly he falls down a bottomless pit, which is, you know, not ideal for maintaining a Sith apprentice roster. But here's where it gets dark. With Qui-Gon dead, Obi-Wan inherits Anakin Skywalker. He's a newly minted knight, emotionally wrecked, and 0% prepared to mentor the most powerful Force-sensitive in galactic history. If Qui-Gon had lived, his compassionate mentorship might have actually guided Anakin safely. Instead, the galaxy's fate gets handed to a traumatized 25-year-old, and the slow avalanche toward catastrophe begins. But if you think one, death, rerouting a prophecy is bad, wait until you see what happens when the Sith Master himself steps into the ring. The most powerful Jedi to ever live walked into the Senate chamber to stop the most powerful Sith and lost. But here's the thing, that loss wasn't a failure. It was the smartest decision Yoda ever made. Yoda versus Darth Sidious. Innings. BBY. The Republic is literally collapsing around them as Yoda confronts Darth Sidious in the very heart of galactic democracy. Sidious launches into vicious Form 7 acrobatics, cackling like a man who just won the lottery, which legally speaking he basically had. He hurls entire Senate pods like artillery shells, turning the symbol of representative government into a weapon of authoritarian spectacle. Democracy isn't just dying here, it's being used as ammunition. Yoda counters with Ataru agility, bouncing off podiums and absorbing Sidious's Force lightning barehanded, redirecting it right back at him. For a moment, it looks like a genuine stalemate, but when that final explosive blast of lightning sends Yoda tumbling to the floor, the truth becomes clear. He cannot win this. Not today. So Yoda runs, and that is not cowardice. It is strategic humility. The old guard cannot reverse the tide through raw power alone. The prequel Jedi era is over, and no single climactic master versus master showdown will undo systemic corruption. Victory will require something the old order never understood: compassion and familial love, not just a bigger laser sword. Yoda trusts the Force to raise up new hope. But if you think Yoda's retreat was sobering, wait until you see the duel where Sidious nearly met his match. Mace Windu vs Darth Sidious. This is the duel that broke the galaxy. In 19 BBY, Mace Windu and 3 Jedi Masters confront Chancellor Palpatine, and Palpatine erupts from his chair like a dark side grenade. He dispatches Masters Fisto, Teen, and Kohler in about 6 seconds of explosive Form 7 fury, rest in peace gentlemen, leaving only Mace standing. What follows is the most debated fight in Star Wars history. Mace is the primary master of Vapad, a wildly controversial Form 7 variant that literally channels an opponent's dark side energy back at them. Add in Mace's Shatterpoint perception, which lets him see critical weaknesses in people and events, and he appears to genuinely overpower Sidious. He disarms him, deflects his lightning back to burn and deform his face, and has him cornered. But here's where it gets complicated. Did Palpatine actually lose, or did he strategically feign weakness to secure Anakin's fall? Here's the thing. Palpatine himself points to Mace's lack of empathy as a shatterpoint he exploits. Mace's rigid, cold insistence on executing Palpatine pushes Anakin exactly where Sidious needs him. When Anakin severs Mace's arm, allowing Sidious to blast him out the window, the Jedi's most formidable warrior is killed by the boy he mistrusted, not the Sith Lord he defeated. The Republic dies, the Empire rises, and Order 66 annihilates the Jedi, all because Mace couldn't find the shatterpoint in himself. But if you think Sidious was ruthless to Anakin, wait until you see what he did to his own former apprentice. Darth Sidious versus Maul and Savage Opress. In 19 BBY, Darth Maul does what no former Sith apprentice should ever attempt. He builds his own empire. After seizing control of Mandalore through a criminal syndicate called the Shadow Collective, Maul genuinely believes he's escaped Sidious's reach. He hasn't. The moment Sidious learns that his old apprentice is playing warlord on a galactic scale, he travels to Mandalore personally to remind Maul of a very simple rule. There are only 2 Sith at a time, and Maul is no longer one of them. What follows is one of the most one-sided beatdowns in Star Wars. Sidious dual-wields Crimson Sabers in a spinning acrobatic offense that isolates Maul and Savage Opress one at a time, seamlessly integrating levitation, force pushes, and chokes into his blade work like he's conducting an orchestra of violence. Savage, who is genuinely powerful and genuinely cares for his brother, charges in to protect Maul. Sidious kills him with a casual flourish, running him through and leaving him to die in Maul's arms. Then he turns his full attention to Maul, disarms him, and subjects him to prolonged force torture while cackling about how he has plans for him, which is somehow worse than just killing him outright. The fight is a ritual enforcement of the rule of 2, but it's also a family tragedy of a different flavor than the Skywalkers. Savage dies protecting someone who cared about him, while Sidious views both brothers as expendable assets he can discard or repurpose whenever convenient. Maul's attempt to build an independent Sith-aligned empire is crushed before it can threaten the Clone Wars, and he's reduced from former apprentice to pawn. The duel showcases Sidious as not merely a schemer, but a frontline combatant capable of dismantling 2 of the franchise's most formidable dark side warriors by himself. And it's a stark reminder that no matter how far Maul climbs, he will always be outmatched by the man who shaped him. But if you think watching a Sith Lord torture his former apprentice is disturbing, wait until you see what happens when a Jedi faces the student she once trained as a Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, versus Darth Vader, Malachor. This duel is unresolved attachment, and it hurts to watch. Deep inside the Malachor Sith Temple, Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra are exploring when Vader shows up. As the temple collapses, Ahsoka tells the others to run. She's staying because she just figured out the monster in the black armor is Anakin Skywalker, and she refuses to abandon him again. Ahsoka already walked away from the Jedi Order after they falsely accused her of treason. That departure broke something between her and Anakin, and she's carried the guilt ever since. Now face to face with what he's become, she insists, "I won't leave you." Vader twists their shared history into fuel for hatred. To him, she's just another Jedi who failed him. To her, he's still her mentor, buried somewhere under the armor. The fight is brutal. Vader uses deliberate, crushing strikes. He's a walking tank, corralling Ahsoka where her mobility becomes useless, but she fights with twin white lightsabers, darting in and out of his reach, targeting the joints in his armor. She knows exactly how he used to fight before Mustafar, giving her openings most opponents never find. She manages to leap behind him and slash his helmet, cracking it open. For a second, you see Anakin's scarred face and hear his real voice bleeding through the vocoder. He's still in there, drowning. But here's where it gets dark. Vader recovers almost immediately. The crack doesn't redeem him, it enrages him. He doubles down because acknowledging Anakin means acknowledging unbearable pain. He forces her toward a collapsing chasm. Ahsoka pushes Ezra to safety, but chooses to stay and fight. As the structure seals, Vader limps away, barely alive, and Ahsoka disappears into the ruins. Unlike most duels, this doesn't end in a body count. It ends in unresolved grief and the crushing knowledge that some people can't be saved. At least Ahsoka tried. But if you think one ghost from Anakin's past refusing to give up is devastating, wait until you hear about the final confrontation between two men who hated each other for decades, ending in 3 seconds on a desert planet. Darth Maul versus Qui-Gon. Jin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Maul had one of the longest, most obsessive rivalries in Star Wars history. It started on Naboo when Maul killed Qui-Gon Jinn, continued through the Clone Wars, and it finally ended on Tatooine in the middle of the desert. Around 2 BBY, decades after their last encounter, Maul tracked Obi-Wan across the galaxy with one goal: kill the man who ruined his life. When he finally found him guarding the Lars homestead, he realized Kenobi was protecting someone, and the moment Maul threatened the boy, Obi-Wan drew his blade. The duel lasted 3 seconds. Maul ignited his double-bladed saber and dropped into the same stance he used on Naboo, one-handed, blade stretched to the side, trying to relive his greatest victory. Obi-Wan cycled through 3 different guards and moments: his familiar prequel stance, a classical pose associated with Qui-Gon, and finally a calm, centered position that radiated complete focus. A visual summary of his entire life, from impetuous Padawan to serene guardian. When the clash came, Maul tried the exact same move he used to kill Qui-Gon, a feint followed by a hilt strike to stagger Obi-Wan before the killing blow. Obi-Wan had studied that moment for decades. He anticipated it, countered in one fluid motion, and bisected Maul through the torso in a single strike. Maul collapsed into Obi-Wan's arms, dying. He asked if the one Kenobi was protecting was the chosen one. When Obi-Wan confirmed it, Maul whispered, "He will avenge us. Not avenge me. Avenge us." In his final breath, Maul saw them both as victims of Sidious, broken men trapped in a cycle neither chose. Obi-Wan held him gently as he died, no longer seeing the monster who murdered his master, but a man who never escaped the Sith's abuse. A lifetime of hatred, condensed into 3 seconds of blade contact, ending with shared acknowledgement of pain. Maul spent decades hunting revenge, and the only peace he found was in the arms of the man he hated most. But if you think one final duel between old enemies is tragic, the next one will break you in a completely different way. Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, Death Star. Obi-Wan and Vader rematch aboard the Death Star in 0 BBY 19 years after Mustafar, and this is ritual farewell encoded in blade contact. Every strike carries the weight of 2 decades spent haunted by the same lava bank. This is not a fight to win, this is closure in motion. The duel itself is slower, more deliberate. Vader advances with heavy, implacable strikes, using his mechanical strength to press Kenobi backward. His movements are patient, like a man who has waited nearly 2 decades for this exact moment and refuses to rush it. Obi-Wan responds with defensive Sorasu parries, never committing to a killing blow because he's buying time for Luke and the others to escape. That's the entire tactical objective. But here's the thing. Obi-Wan doesn't just lose this duel, he chooses to end it. At the moment Luke watches, Obi-Wan lowers his guard, lifts his eyes toward the boy, and allows Vader to cut him down. He disappears into the Force, leaving only robes and a lightsaber behind. No body, no scream, just a serene exit that Vader, for all his power, cannot comprehend. For Luke, this is his first deep encounter with loss. Watching his mentor fall, powerless to intervene, sears into him a hatred of the Empire and a determination to fight back. He doesn't understand why Obi-Wan gave up. He won't understand for years. All he knows is that the old man who saved him is gone and Vader killed him. Here's where it gets weird. Vader's victory is completely hollow. Killing Obi-Wan doesn't erase Mustafar, it only makes Obi-Wan more powerful. As a Force spirit, Kenobi gains the ability to guide Luke at crucial moments, like the Death Star trench run, where his disembodied voice tells Luke to trust the Force. Vader thinks he's won. He's actually just handed the rebellion a ghost mentor who can't be killed twice, and that's the real genius of Obi-Wan's sacrifice. He turns his death into a weapon. Vader can't grasp that. He's trapped in a suit, in pain, in rage, in a need to dominate. Obi-Wan is free. Vader just killed a man who was already gone. If you think watching your mentor die in front of you is traumatic, wait until you find out your enemy is your father and you have to fight him twice before he finally turns back to the light. Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, Bespin. Luke Skywalker is either the bravest kid in the galaxy or the dumbest. He abandons his training on Dagobah, ignores Yoda and Obi-Wan's warnings, and flies straight into Vader's trap on Cloud City. The Sith Lord wants to turn him or break him, and break him is exactly what happens. Here's the thing. This isn't a duel. It's a lesson. Vader toys with Luke from the start, deflecting strikes one-handed while casually hurling debris with the Force. He treats the whole encounter like a sparring session, parrying Luke's swings with bored efficiency that says I've already won this. But when Luke lands a glancing blow on Vader's shoulder, the Sith Lord stops playing. He escalates, driving Luke back through narrow corridors, battering him with overwhelming strength until the kid is desperate and outmatched. Then comes the hand. Vader severs Luke's right hand in one clean cut, the mechanical grip and lightsaber tumbling into the abyss. It's the exact same injury Anakin suffered on Geonosis when Dooku cut off his arm, a generational repetition of trauma that shows the Skywalker family is cursed to lose pieces of themselves over and over. But here's where it gets worse. Standing over Luke, who's clinging to a gantry in agony, Vader delivers the revelation that shatters everything. No, I am your father. Luke built his entire identity around avenging his father, a noble Jedi supposedly murdered by Vader. Learning the villain he hates is the parent he longed to know creates unbearable cognitive dissonance. The war isn't just political anymore, it's existentially horrifying. Vader offers him a choice. Join me and rule the galaxy as father and son, or die. Luke's response is to let go and fall into the abyss. He would rather risk death than let the dark side define him. He doesn't make this decision calmly. He makes it an emotional collapse, but it's still a refusal to submit. Vader loses him not because Luke defeats him, but because Luke chooses the fall over corruption. This duel doesn't just humble Luke, it educates him in the brutal reality that his conflict is older, darker, and more personal than he ever imagined. At least Luke survives to process the trauma. The next time he faces Vader, he'll understand that the war isn't won by killing his father. It's won by refusing to become him. Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Vader, Mustafar. The Mustafar duel is the fratricidal inferno that sets the galaxy on fire. Hours after Anakin massacres the Jedi Temple and slaughters the Separatist Council, Obi-Wan arrives expecting to reason with his former Padawan. Instead, he finds a man who has fully embraced the Sith, convinced the Jedi are traitors, and that burning children alive was somehow necessary. When Anakin declares, "If you're not with me, then you're my enemy," the line isn't drawn in the sand. It's carved into lava. Anakin channels dark side rage into a relentless offensive that borders on uncontrolled fury. His combat style fuses raw power with acrobatic sequences, but it's driven by emotion rather than discipline. He's faster, stronger, and angrier than he's ever been. The problem is that anger narrows your options. You stop thinking tactically and start thinking about dominance, which is exactly what Obi-Wan is counting on. Obi-Wan leans into Sorasu's defensive discipline, weathering the assault with tight blade work and minimal motion. He's not trying to overpower Anakin. He's waiting for the decisive opening, the moment when fury overextends into hubris. The fight spills across landing platforms and lava flows, and the entire time Obi-Wan is controlling angles and refusing to give Anakin the emotional satisfaction of a reckless counter. When Obi-Wan finally maneuvers to higher ground and warns Anakin not to try it, he's offering one last chance to retreat. Anakin, convinced he can overpower physics with rage, leaps anyway. Obi-Wan's strike is precise and devastating. He severs Anakin's remaining limbs in a single motion, leaving him sprawled on a volcanic slope, screaming as his body ignites. The image of Anakin burning while Obi-Wan watches, unable to finish the job but equally unable to save him, is one of the saga's most emotionally brutal moments. Sidious retrieves the limbless wreck and rebuilds him with cybernetics intentionally designed to keep Vader dependent and deepen his connection to suffering. The suit isn't just life support, it's a prison. Every breath Vader takes is a reminder of his failure and his subservience to Sidious. The Emperor doesn't give him the best possible prosthetics. He gives him the ones that hurt. Obi-Wan's failure to kill Anakin ensures the Emperor will have a terrifying enforcer, while Obi-Wan retreats to Tatooine carrying guilt that shapes his later mentorship of Luke. This duel is the turning point. The Republic becomes the Empire, Anakin becomes Vader, and the Jedi are reduced to scattered survivors. But it also plants the seeds of redemption. At least Mustafar gave Vader a body to work with, unlike what's waiting for Luke when he discovers the full extent of what his father has become. Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, Death Star 2. The Death Star 2 duel in 4 ABY is orchestrated by Palpatine as a trap. Luke will either kill Vader in hatred and take his place, or die as a threat is removed. Either way, the Emperor wins, but Luke refuses to play that game. He initially resists combat entirely, hiding his saber, declaring, "I am a Jedi, like my father before me." He's not trying to win a duel, he's trying to save his dad, but Vader knows exactly how to break him. The moment Vader threatens Leia, probing Luke's feelings and realizing he has a twin sister, Luke snaps. He erupts in a furious barrage that overwhelms Vader completely, battering him back into the shadows, slashing wildly until he severs Vader's right hand. Standing over his defeated father, saber raised, Luke has won. He could end this. He has every reason to end this. And then he looks at his own mechanical hand, then at Vader's severed cybernetic limb sparking on the floor, and he recognizes the horror of what he is becoming. Luke makes the single most important decision in the entire saga. He throws down his saber, he turns to the Emperor and says, "I'll never turn to the dark side. You've failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. This is non-violent resistance. Luke has the power to kill. He chooses mercy instead." And Palpatine, furious at being defied, attacks Luke with lightning, cackling as he tortures him. Luke writhes on the floor, crying out for help, and Vader, moved by his son's cries, finally breaks. After decades of servitude, Anakin Skywalker turns on Sidious. He grabs the Emperor, lifts him overhead despite the lightning tearing through his own systems, and hurls him down the reactor shaft. The act destroys Vader's life support. He dies saving Luke, fulfilling the Chosen One prophecy through redemption, not raw power. Luke's victory redefines what it means to be a Jedi. He wins by integrating attachment and compassion, proving love need not lead to the dark side. He refuses to kill his father despite having every tactical and galactic reason to do so, and that refusal, that steadfast belief in buried goodness, breaks through decades of Sith armor and reshapes galactic destiny. Power and mercy fuse, the Emperor falls, the prophecy is fulfilled. But if you think that's the last time a Force wielder has to choose between power and principle, you're about to meet two very different people fighting 8 very angry guards in red. Rey and Kylo versus Praetorian guards. Snoke has Rey exactly where he wants her, bound, humiliated, watching him torture her mind. He orders Kylo to kill her and complete his Sith transformation, but Kylo does something nobody sees coming. He rotates the lightsaber on Snoke's armrest, ignites it remotely with the Force, and slices his master in half. Just like that, the most powerful dark side user in the galaxy is gone, and 8 elite Praetorian guards are out for blood. These aren't stormtroopers. They're hand-to-hand specialists armed with exotic melee weapons designed to counter lightsabers, Electro Bacento polearms, Vibro Arbier blades, Bellari Electro chain whips. Every weapon can block a saber strike, and they fight in coordinated pairs to isolate and overwhelm Force users. They have literally one job, and they failed, which is, not ideal. Rey and Kylo fight back-to-back. Kylo uses raw power, grabbing a guard's weapon mid-strike to finish another. Rey falls back on quarterstaff instincts, using wide sweeps and improvised weapon grabs to stay alive. At one point, she drops her saber, grabs a guard's blade, and uses it against him. It's a stunning demonstration of how two Force users with completely different styles can synchronize when survival is on the line. Then it's over. 8 bodies, no survivors. Kylo extends his hand. Let the past die. Kill the Jedi, kill the Sith, kill everything. Just the two of them ruling the galaxy in a nihilistic reset where nothing matters except raw power. Rey refuses. She chooses hope, and their alliance shatters. Unlike Luke and Vader's reconciliation, this team-up ends in ideological rupture. Kylo killed Snoke not to save Rey, but to eliminate the one person standing between him and absolute control. Rey sees this, rejects it, and escapes with the broken Skywalker saber. This fight proves 3 things. Dark side lineages persist, and Kylo steps right into the vacuum. Force dyads can manifest in devastating combat even when the participants disagree, and chosen identity triumphs over blood destiny. Rey was born from Palpatine's darkness, but chooses the light. Kylo was born from Han and Leia's light, but chooses power. Their paths diverge here, and the galaxy will burn because of it. The Sith didn't just build weapons. They built things that think, things that talk, things that wait. From a chatty pyramid that slowly rewrites your personality, to a sentient staff that destroyed an entire planet out of spite. Today, I'm breaking down every dangerous Sith artifact, starting with the one that looks the most harmless: Sith holocrons. Think of a Sith holocron as the galaxy's most dangerous paperweight. It's a small crystal pyramid, and when you open it, a 3D projection of the Sith Lord who built it appears and starts talking to you, teaching you, guiding you. Sounds almost helpful, right? Here's where it gets dark. The corruption isn't some dramatic lightning bolt, it's gradual. The holocron talks to you like a mentor, feeds you just enough dark side philosophy that you don't even notice your thinking is changing. And the Jedi classified these among the most dangerous artifacts in the galaxy, specifically because the corruption is almost impossible to detect until it's too late. Ezra Bridger learned that the hard way. He pulled a Sith holocron from the temple on Malachor and kept consulting it for months. His master Kanan eventually had to confiscate it because Ezra was visibly drifting toward the dark side and didn't even realize it. But here's what changes everything. The Sith invented holocron technology at least 3,000 years before the Jedi did, and some holocrons weren't just storage devices, they doubled as activation keys for massive superweapons, including the Malachor Temple itself. They were keys, weapons, and recruitment tools all disguised as ancient relics. And compared to what's coming next, a chatty pyramid is practically a warm hug. Huey's because the next artifact sat in plain sight inside the office of the most powerful man in the galaxy and nobody noticed. The Scythe Chalice. Most Sith artifacts want to kill you, possess you, or turn you into something horrible. The Sith Chalice just wants you to burn some incense and think dark thoughts. These were metallic incense burners used by the ancient Sith during meditation rituals and initiation ceremonies. No blades, no curses, no trapped spirits. Just a tool designed to put the user into an altered mental state more receptive to Sith philosophy. Subtle, almost boring by Sith standards. But here's where it gets funny. Darth Sidious kept one of these sitting out in his personal quarters while he was still pretending to be Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Jedi walked through that room. Jedi Council members had meetings with this man. And when nobody, not a single one of them, looked at the ancient Sith ritual artifact on his shelf and thought, hey, that's a little weird. The confidence is almost respectable. This wasn't hidden in a vault or locked behind a secret panel. It was decorative. And the specific chalice Sidious owned wasn't some random knockoff. It was excavated from the Massassi ruins on Yavin 4, meaning it had been buried for centuries before somehow ending up on the desk of the most dangerous man in the galaxy. He treated a 1,000-year-old Sith relic like a conversation piece. He wasn't the only one who had access to these things either. A Lannic smuggler on Nar Shaddaa had one. The antiquities dealer Luthen Rael kept one in his Coruscant gallery as early as 5 BBY. These artifacts were scattered everywhere, hiding in plain sight, because unlike most Sith relics, they don't reach out and corrupt you. They just quietly make the dark side feel a little more natural, which is arguably scarier than a weapon. But if you want actual navigation-grade Sith technology, the next artifact could literally guide you to the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, the Scythe Wayfinder. Think of the most dangerous lock in the galaxy. Now imagine the key doesn't blast open a door or unleash some ancient weapon, it just shows you where the door is. That's the Sith Wayfinder, and that simplicity is exactly what makes it terrifying. Built from Cathal resin and Cybatara wax and glass, the Wayfinder looks like a four-sided pyramid. Not a holocron, though people confuse them constantly. Here's the thing, the Wayfinder is actually the direct ancestor of holocron technology. Navigation came before knowledge storage and Sith civilization, which tells you everything about their priorities. They figured out how to find hidden places before they figured out how to record what they learned there. But the Wayfinder only does one job. It guides a ship safely through the unknown regions to Exegol. Without one, the journey is effectively suicide. Unstable hyperspace conditions, uncharted anomalies, gravitational nightmares. No standard navicomputer can plot that route. You either have a Wayfinder or you don't go, and only 2 were ever made. Under Darth Bane's rule of 2, 1 Wayfinder was given to each Sith Lord. Darth Vader received his through the Eye of Webbish Bog on Mustafar. Darth Sidious kept the other. 1 device per Sith, both pointing to the same impossible secret. Kylo Ren eventually modified his TIE Whisper to accept the Wayfinder's binary signal and flew directly to Exegol. Rey later did the same thing with Luke's old X-Wing. But here's where it gets complicated. The corruption of the Wayfinder isn't supernatural. It doesn't whisper to you or twist your mind. It's purely strategic. If you hold a Wayfinder, you know where the Sith's greatest secret is buried. That knowledge alone reshapes your position within the entire Sith hierarchy. You're no longer just a follower. You're someone who knows where the real power lives. and a key is only as dangerous as the door it opens. But the door this one leads to, that's where an ancient Sith Lord's staff was waiting to teach anyone willing to listen, the staff of Zoxan. Zoxan wasn't just another Sith Lord. She was one of the original 12 Dark Jedi exiled from the Republic around 6900 BBY, the group that discovered Korriban, enslaved the native Sith species, and built the entire Sith religion from scratch under Ajunta Pal. Her teachings aren't some watered-down version passed through centuries of Sith politics and infighting. They're the source code, the foundational dark side philosophy before anyone had a chance to dilute it. And that's exactly what makes her staff so dangerous. The artifact functioned as a living connection to Zoshan's consciousness, not just a library of techniques, but an ongoing, intimate relationship with one of the first Sith Lords who ever existed. Her holocron sat buried in the tombs of Korriban for millennia, completely forgotten, until a former Jedi Master named Asharid Het stumbled across it. Here's where it gets unsettling. Het didn't fall immediately. He told himself he was studying Zoshan's teachings as a disguise, a cover story while he operated on Korriban. He was a trained Jedi Master. He knew what the dark side looked like, but the oldest teachings don't feel like seduction. They feel like clarity. Slowly, without any dramatic moment of corruption, Het stopped pretending. He wasn't using Zoshan's philosophy as cover anymore. He was genuinely her student, learning directly from a voice that had been speaking the dark side since before most Sith traditions even existed. A Jedi Master who walked in thinking he was smarter than the artifact and walked out belonging to it. That's the trap with foundational knowledge. It doesn't trigger your defenses because it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like the truth you've been missing. But if Zoshan's staff corrupts through wisdom, the next artifact corrupts through something far more direct. Raw, physical power. The Gauntlet of Kresh the Younger. A Sith Lord built this for his kid, Ludo Kresh, over 5,000 years before the Clone Wars. Crafted this gauntlet specifically so his son Elsho could never be hurt. 5 linked black plates with red gems and gold tassels, worn on the forearm. It's almost sweet, in a deeply twisted Sith kind of way. But here's what it actually does. The gauntlet generates a web of dark side energy roughly 1/3 of a meter around the wearer, and anything that enters that zone without the wearer's consent gets dealt with. Small objects are vaporized instantly. Larger objects get thrown back with serious force. Shiyu blaster bolts are absorbed, and can be redirected at whoever fired them. Even telekinetic force attacks get repelled like they're nothing. And it doesn't stop there. This thing survived direct lightsaber strikes. It even worked against Yuuzhan Vong biotechnology, which is force dead. That means the gauntlet could protect you from enemies that most force powers can't even touch. It's arguably the most complete personal defense system ever created in Star Wars. But the gauntlet's history is pure chaos. The fallen Jedi Hazen used it in a scheme to overthrow the Jedi Council. When that failed, it got locked in a vault on the moon Dry 2. Then the Jedi and Death Watch fought over it. Then someone tied it to a rock and threw it into a river. Darkside cultists eventually fished it out, killed each other over it, and it bounced around the black market until Darth Cryptus finally acquired it. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The gauntlet has one fatal flaw, and it's you. The protection only blocks contact you don't consent to. Anyone who can trick you, earn your trust, or get close enough that you lower your guard can reach you just fine. And knowing your invincible shield has a social engineering exploit slowly turns you into someone who trusts absolutely no one. The gauntlet doesn't corrupt through rage or hunger. It corrupts through paranoia, the most powerful armor in the galaxy, and its only weakness is the person wearing it. But if paranoia sounds bad, wait until you hear about an artifact designed to keep you imperfect. Sheen conscious agony forever. The embrace of pain. Every artifact we've covered so far was built to grant power. This one was built to take everything away from you as slowly as possible. The embrace of pain was an organic, rack-like device that suspended its victims upside down in restraint bands. That alone sounds bad enough, but here's what made it genuinely nightmarish. It was smart. The embrace read the electrochemical outputs of your nerve impulses in real time, constantly evaluating your brain chemistry to calculate exactly how to maximize your suffering. It didn't just hurt you, it optimized the process, and the methods it used were relentless. Joint stretching, acid application, electrical shocks delivered through thousands of individual contact points, sharp implements, needles, thorns, and injected biotoxins that attacked your nervous system from the inside. All of these ran simultaneously, calibrated by the device itself so that your body could never adapt. You couldn't dissociate. You couldn't pass out from shock. The embrace wouldn't let you. But here's where it gets truly evil. When a victim approached death, the device would lower them to the floor, let them sleep, feed them water and nutrients, heal their wounds, and then start the entire process over again. It was specifically designed to make death impossible for as long as it wanted to continue. There was no escape through dying. The chamber housing this thing sat deep beneath the Sith temple on Coruscant, down a converted maintenance corridor with black stone steps leading to the device. This wasn't some hidden dungeon. It was treated as sacred space within Sith worship, meaning the systematic torture of living beings held genuine spiritual significance in Sith philosophy. Now here's the part that makes this section impossible to forget. The Yuuzhan Vong, specifically members of Domain Shai, did not consider the embrace of pain to be torture. They used it as meditation. They willingly entered this device, the same one documented as capable of turning committed Jedi to the dark side, and treated it like a path to enlightenment. The scariest thing about the embrace of pain isn't the device itself. It's that an entire civilization looked at it and said that's a great way to relax. But if the embrace destroyed people from the outside in, the next artifact did something far worse. It destroyed them from the inside out, and then used what was left. The Moor Talisman. One artifact on this list caused a galaxy-spanning plague that lasted thousands of years. Not a superweapon, not a battle station, a piece of jewelry. The Moor Talisman was forged by Sith Lord Sorza Sin for her fellow Lord Karness Moor, thousands of years before even the Golden Age of the Sith. But here's what made it different from every other amulet or relic we've talked about so far. Moor didn't just own this thing. He poured his mind, his will, and his Sith magic directly into it, making the talisman a literal extension of his consciousness. So when Moor's physical body eventually died, he didn't actually die. He just moved in. His spirit lived inside the talisman. He could appear as an apparition to whoever was wearing it, communicate with nearby Force users, and whenever his current host died, the artifact would automatically seek out the most powerful Force sensitive in the area and latch onto them. This wasn't a haunted object. This was a dead Sith Lord, still running his agenda from inside a necklace. But the real horror was what it did to everyone else. Any non-Force sensitive who got struck by the talisman immediately contracted the Rakghoul plague and transformed into a mindless, mutated Rakghoul far faster than natural infection ever could. And under a Force user's command, it could convert every suitable being within a wide radius simultaneously. You could generate an entire army of monsters in minutes. Moor essentially weaponized a pandemic and strapped it to his soul. And here's where the scale gets truly insane. Jedi Master Celeste Morn was exposed to the talisman in 3965 BBY. She didn't age a single day, not one. She was eventually freed roughly 4,000 years later in 19 BBY, completely unchanged. The talisman halted all aging in its host, keeping Moor's vessel alive and ready indefinitely. The Rakghoul plague spread across entire worlds during those millennia. Taris, the Undercity, deep space outposts. It became one of the longest-running pandemics in galactic history, all traceable back to one artifact and one very stubborn dead man. It wasn't until 137 ABY that Jedi Knight Cade Skywalker finally ended it. He used the Force to obliterate both the talisman and Moor's essence permanently, and at that exact moment, every Rakghoul in the galaxy dropped dead. The plague went extinct, a pandemic that had persisted for millennia. Wiped out the second the source was destroyed. But if the Moor Talisman terrifies you because a Sith Lord's consciousness survived inside it for thousands of years, wait until you hear about a mask that didn't preserve a mind. It preserved a hunger. The Mask of Darth Nihilus. Every Sith artifact on this list promises you something. Power, knowledge, immortality, control. This one promises you nothing. It just takes. When Mitra Surik finally defeated Darth Nihilus aboard the Ravager, something strange happened. His body didn't fall. It didn't bleed. It dissolved into nothing, because there was nothing left of him to dissolve. The Lord of Hunger had consumed so many worlds, so many lives, that his physical form had long since been eaten away by his own appetite. All that remained were his robes, his lightsaber, and his mask. Not remnants of a dead man, remnants of a void, but here's where it gets unsettling. The mask didn't just survive Nihilus, it carried him forward. The artifact retained a portion of the actual tear in reality that Nihilus had created through his existence, functioning as a portable nexus of the dark side. Not a weapon, not a tool. A wound in the Force that someone shaped into a face, and it does something no other Sith artifact does. It stores the memories of everyone who has ever worn it. Every person who put that mask on had their consciousness absorbed into it, layered beneath the next wearer's mind like sediment. You're not possessed, you're not controlled, You just suddenly have an ever-growing archive of dead people's lives sitting underneath your own thoughts. Yours whispering through your decisions without you ever realizing where the impulse came from. The game itself understood this. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, when you defeat Nihilus, you can pick up his mask. It goes into your inventory. You can see it sitting right there. But you can never equip it, it just exists in your possession, unequipable, yet it passively increases your force capacity simply by being carried. The artifact doesn't need you to wear it. Its influence radiates outward regardless. That's not a game limitation. That's the mask telling you exactly what it is, and every single person who tried to use it paid for it. Legend sources consistently describe the mask as cursed rather than powerful. Every wielder was reportedly drawn toward acts of ruin and self-destruction, each mirroring the exact compulsion that forced Nihilus to feed and feed until there was nothing left. The mask doesn't seduce you with strength. It hollows you out from the inside until you're just another layer of memory for the next fool who picks it up. But if Nihilus's mask is a void that consumes its wearer from within, the next mask on this list does something arguably worse. It doesn't erase you, it replaces you entirely. The mask of Lord Momin Darth Momin was an artist, and that's the most terrifying sentence in this entire video. He was a sculptor specifically, and his work was so deeply disturbing that he wasn't just criticized or ignored, he was imprisoned for it. The materials he used, the things he depicted, whatever he was creating was horrific enough that people decided locking him away was the only reasonable response. But here's where it gets interesting. A Sith lady named Darth Shah saw potential in Momin, freed him, and took him on as her apprentice. She trained him in the dark side, gave him purpose, gave him power. He killed her. His reasoning was pure Sith philosophy taken to its logical extreme. Momin believed that calling anyone master was fundamentally incompatible with being Sith. You can't claim to embody ultimate power while kneeling to someone else, so he removed the contradiction permanently and went independent. What he did next was worse than anything he'd sculpted. Momin designed a temporal superweapon, a device that would freeze an entire city at the exact moment of its destruction, trapping every person's expression of terror and pain forever. Not to conquer, not to intimidate, to create art. But when the Jedi intervened to stop the weapon's activation, Momin lost control of the Force energy and his body was completely destroyed. His consciousness, though, survived inside his mask, and the Jedi, rather than destroying it, locked the mask in the Jedi Temple vaults. It sat there for decades, patient, waiting. After the fall of the Jedi Order and the death of Chief Librarian Jocasta Nu, Darth Sidious personally retrieved the mask and gave it to Darth Vader as a gift, alongside the planet Mustafar and the Naboo Royal Starship. Sidious believed the mask would help Vader unlock secrets hidden in an ancient Sith cave on Mustafar, but the mask had its own plans. A stormtrooper commander put it on. Momin's consciousness immediately seized complete control of the man's body, and while possessing this random trooper, Momin designed the full architectural plans for Fortress Vader in minutes. Not hours, minutes. His genius hadn't decayed at all across centuries of imprisonment. Every skill, every obsession, fully intact and ready to work, but that's not even the scariest part. Momin then tried to get Vader himself to wear the mask. Through a vision, he nearly convinced one of the most powerful Force users alive to put it on. Vader almost did it. Think about that. The mask didn't just passively wait for hosts. It actively hunted for them, and it was confident enough to target Darth Vader. That tells you everything about what this artifact thinks of itself. If you think a mask with a god complex is bad, wait until you hear about an artifact that doesn't just think it's a god. It acts like one. The Dark Staff. Every artifact we've covered so far has been dangerous, but they've all been tools. Someone picks them up, someone uses them, someone suffers the consequences. The Dark Staff flipped that dynamic entirely, because the Dark Staff uses you. Physically, it's nothing impressive. A brown rod about a meter long, crooked at one end, with a faint blue light glowing at the other. It looks like something you'd find in a junk shop, but this thing is sentient. It thinks, it plans, it has opinions, and if you interrupt it while it's talking, it gets genuinely angry, like a Sith Lord with the temperament of a toddler and the destructive capacity of a Death Star. Here's where it gets dark. The Sith Lord who originally created the Dark Staff realized what they'd made and tried to destroy it. The staff killed them first. It decided it didn't want to be unmade, so it simply removed the problem. The Sith Emperor's people eventually recovered it, determined it was too dangerous to use, but too powerful to destroy, and locked it aboard the Arcanum, a space station built specifically to store artifacts that nobody knew what to do with. Around 3638 BBY, it was stolen. But the staff's real masterpiece was what it did to the Obli species on the planet Oblis. After falling into their hands, the Dark Staff manufactured a crisis from nothing. It summoned a shadow creature to the planet's atmosphere, then convinced the Obli that they needed to weaponize the staff to fight it. The Obli powered it up. The staff destroyed the entire planet. Every living thing on Obli's gone. The debris became what we now know as the Cooleran asteroid belt. The staff engineered an extinction event as a side project, and it wasn't even the staff's endgame. It just needed the energy, and the manipulation didn't stop there. A researcher named Len Marcus later studied ancient inscriptions about the Dark Staff and concluded it could control minds. The inscriptions actually described its ability to warp and destroy minds. Completely different thing. But the Dark Staff let Marcus believe the friendlier interpretation because a deluded pawn was more useful than a terrified one. This is what makes the Dark Staff uniquely horrifying. It doesn't just want power. It believes it has a fundamental right to end lives, consume the Force itself, and decide which beings deserve to exist. It's not mindlessly destructive. It's strategically cruel, patient, and genuinely condescending about the whole thing. But if the Dark Staff weaponizes destruction, the next artifact weaponizes something arguably worse: time itself. The Fermata Cage. Darth Maulman didn't want to kill people. He wanted to freeze them at the exact moment of peak terror and preserve their screaming faces forever, as an art project. Let that sit with you for a second, because this is where Sith philosophy stops being about power or conquest and becomes something genuinely unrecognizable. Maulman wasn't trying to win anything. He was trying to curate. The Fermata Cage is an hourglass-shaped device containing miniature black holes held in place by a dark side energy matrix. It freezes people in time at the exact moment of capture, preserving them indefinitely in total temporal suspension. Not stasis, not cryosleep, frozen in time. And the victim doesn't age, doesn't think, doesn't experience the passage of seconds or centuries. They just exist, locked in whatever expression they wore when the cage activated. But Maulman didn't build this as a weapon. He built it as a canvas. His entire philosophy revolved around capturing suffering at its most raw and intense, then preserving it permanently so he could admire it. The screams, the wide eyes, the exact muscle tension of someone realizing they're about to die. Maulman wanted to own those moments the way a collector owns a painting, and releasing someone from the Fermata Cage requires a massive influx of dark side energy, either channeled from a powerful Force user or harvested from living beings nearby. Even the act of freeing someone demands death or corruption. Yeah, there's no clean way to interact with this thing, but here's what really sells the scale of threat. Lady Kyra, leader of Crimson Dawn, specifically plotted to use the Fermata Cage to trap both Darth Sidious and Darth Vader simultaneously. A crime boss looked at the two most dangerous Sith Lords alive and said, yeah, the Fermata Cage can handle both of them. That's the kind of confidence this artifact inspires. The contrast with the Dark Staff is what makes this fascinating. The Dark Staff wants to annihilate everything. Maulman wanted the opposite, to preserve suffering perfectly, indefinitely, in exquisite detail. One is destruction, the other is collection. And honestly, there's something about the Fermata Cage that feels worse. Destruction ends. Being frozen at your worst moment forever, while someone admires your pain like it's hanging in a gallery, that's a kind of cruelty the dark side was never supposed to reach. But if you think freezing people in time is the most devastating thing a Sith artifact can do, wait until you hear about the one that nearly drowned an entire civilization. The Star of Iskalon. Most Sith artifacts come from tombs, temples, or ancient worlds drenched in the dark side. This one comes from the bottom of an ocean, and that alone should tell you something is wrong. Iskalon is a mid-rim aquatic planet, and not just any water world. This place is home to 17 different species that were relocated there over the centuries, all of them building a fragile civilization beneath the waves. The planet itself has a complicated history of outside interference, from imperial occupation to pirate activity. Maz Kanata herself reportedly used Iskalon as a hiding spot for stolen spoils. But buried deeper than any pirate treasure, deeper than the settlements, deeper than the ruins of species that came and went, there's something that predates all of it. The Star of Iskalon is one of those artifacts that barely shows up in the records, and that's exactly what makes it terrifying. Because the Sith artifacts we know everything about are the ones that were studied, contained, cataloged. The ones we know almost nothing about are the ones that were too dangerous to document, or worse, the ones that destroyed everyone who tried. Here's where it gets interesting. The aquatic environment of Iskalon isn't incidental to the artifact. It's essentially a natural prison. Water, pressure, isolation, the thousands of feet of ocean acting as a barrier between the star and anyone foolish enough to go looking for it. The planet's entire ecosystem functions almost like a living vault. 17 17 species coexisting above an object none of them fully understand, living their entire lives on top of something that could theoretically unravel all of it, and the few references that do exist suggest the star doesn't work like other Sith artifacts. It doesn't corrupt through whispers or visions, it doesn't promise power, the dark side energy signature around it is described as passive, almost dormant, like it's waiting, not reaching out, not pulling anyone in, just sitting at the bottom of an ocean, patient for thousands of years. That patience is the scariest part. Every other artifact on this list is aggressive. They want to be found, and they want to be used. The Star of Iskalon doesn't seem to want anything, and in the world of Sith artifacts, the ones that don't actively try to corrupt you are usually the ones capable of something far worse. Nobody has successfully retrieved it. Nobody has fully documented what it does. And considering what the retrievable artifacts have done to the galaxy, maybe the ocean should keep this one. The Sith didn't just build temples, they built nightmares, and then buried them under entire civilizations. Today, I'm breaking down every single Sith temple and everything we know about what's inside, starting with one hiding in the last place you'd ever think to look, the Shrine in the Depths, Coruscant. Here's something that should keep you up at night. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the literal headquarters of the Jedi Order for thousands of years, was built directly on top of a Sith shrine. Not near one, not in the same district, directly on top of it. This shrine dates back roughly 5,000 years before Episode 1. A dark side nexus so powerful, it warped the force around it for millennia, sitting right under the Council's feet the entire time. But here's where it gets weird. The Jedi didn't stumble across this shrine and leave it alone. They conquered it, burned it down, and then made a very deliberate decision. Instead of destroying it completely, they built their temple directly on top of it. The idea was that thousands of Jedi meditating above it would neutralize the dark side energy seeping up from below, which is, a bold strategy. It didn't work. The dark side energy never stopped leaking. Over thousands of years, it clouded the Jedi's ability to sense the Force clearly. Palpatine knew about this and exploited it, using the shrine's residual power to blind the Jedi while he orchestrated the Clone Wars right under their noses. They thought they were containing it. Turns out it was containing them, but at least this shrine was subtle about it. The next temple on our list was actively used for something much worse. The Temple of Sacrifice, Yavin 4. The Rebel Alliance, the scrappy underdogs fighting for freedom and democracy, ran their entire operation out of a building designed for blood sacrifices, and nobody thought to mention it. The Massassi Temple on Yavin 4 was constructed roughly 5,000 years before Luke Skywalker ever set foot on it. Nagasato's Sith followers built the thing to honor Sith deities, complete with chamber systems specifically designed for dark side rituals and ceremonial killings. We're talking purpose-built sacrifice rooms, dedicated spaces where people were drained of life to fuel ancient Sith magic, and the rebellion used those rooms as barracks. Generals slept in them. Pilots ate lunch in them. The entire plan to destroy the Death Star was formulated in a room where people were ritually murdered for thousands of years. Hey, where should we put the tactical hollow table? How about the blood altar chamber? It's got great acoustics. Here's where it gets interesting though. Fans have debated for years whether the temple's residual dark side energy subtly influenced rebellion strategy, whether their increasingly desperate high casualty tactics were nudged along by something ancient and invisible. It's probably nothing. Probably. The bigger question is why Palpatine, a man obsessed with Sith history, never once thought to weaponize the fact that his enemies were literally camping inside a Sith holy site. That feels like a missed opportunity on a galactic scale, but at least the rebels only had to deal with bad vibes. The temple buried under Malastare had something far worse growing inside it, the Sith Temple on Malastare. Most people think of Malastare as the pod racing planet with the funny-looking dugs, but buried beneath its surface was one of the most terrifying creatures the Republic ever encountered, and the way they handled it might be worse than the creature itself. The Zillo Beast was an ancient species native to Malastare, thought to be completely extinct for centuries. Then the Republic dropped an electroproton bomb during a battle with the Separatists. The blast cracked open the planet's crust and outcrawled the last known Zillo Beast. Very much alive, very much angry, which is, not ideal. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. This thing was nearly indestructible, lightsaber-resistant scales, practically immune to conventional weapons. Palpatine personally ordered it captured and transported to Coruscant for study, because of course he did. He wanted its scales reverse-engineered into armor. The beast promptly broke free, rampaged across the capital, and made a direct line for Palpatine himself, almost like it could sense what he really was. The community is still fighting about this one. Some fans argue the Zillo Beast was force-sensitive enough to detect Palpatine's dark side nature. Others think it was just a massive predator going after the nearest threat. But the real question nobody wants to sit with is this. Palpatine ordered the creature killed and then immediately commissioned cloning research on it. The last of its kind, and his first instinct was to make more that he could control. Cool. That's a fun thought to have permanently. But if a weaponized extinction event is unsettling, wait until you hear about the temple they used as a prison for their own people. The Malachor Temple. The Sith are a culture that celebrates murder, torture, and betrayal as legitimate career advancement strategies. Killing your master is literally how you get promoted. So what kind of place do you have to be for the Sith to look at it and go, yeah, nobody should ever go there again? That's Malachor. Thousands of years before the Galactic Civil War, the Sith constructed a massive temple deep beneath Malachor's surface. But this wasn't just a training ground. It was a super weapon. The temple housed a giant Sith holocron at its peak, capable of destroying all life on the planet's surface, which is a terrifying concept when you remember these are people who can already crush organs with their minds. The Jedi Order made Malachor off-limits, and even the Sith treated it as a graveyard. The surface was littered with the petrified remains of thousands of combatants, Sith and Jedi alike, frozen mid-battle by the superweapon's activation during an ancient conflict. They built a doomsday device that went off and turned everyone, including their own people, into statues. When Ezra, Kanan, and Ahsoka finally explored the temple, they found those petrified warriors still standing exactly where they fell, thousands of years old, still locked in combat poses. And here's the part that keeps fans up at night. The temple was still functional. Maul knew it. He'd been waiting for someone force-sensitive enough to help him turn it back on, fully operational, just sitting there waiting for someone to accidentally flip the switch. But if a forgotten Sith superweapon gives you the creeps, wait until you hear about a temple that the Empire literally built a war machine on top of without even realizing it. The Temple of Pomojama, Mimban, is one of those planets where everything is already miserable before you add ancient Force mysteries to the mix. It's a swamp world, perpetually raining, and the Empire decided it was the perfect place to strip mine for minerals and energy resources. So they sent thousands of workers and soldiers into the mud and the dark and told them to dig. What most Imperials didn't care about was that the planet had a deep connection to the Force, including an ancient temple called the Temple of Pomojama. The Empire built an entire military and mining operation on this world, just stomped right over whatever was already there, treated the whole planet like a resource deposit with legs, which is, not ideal. Here's where it gets interesting. The Temple of Pomojama housed the Kyber Crystal, a Force relic that could amplify a user's connection to the Force by an absurd degree. Luke Skywalker and Leia actually ended up on Mimban and fought Darth Vader inside the temple itself. The crystal was so powerful, it let a barely trained Luke hold his own against Vader in lightsaber combat. The real question fans keep circling back to is why the Empire didn't secure the crystal themselves. They had a full military presence on the planet. Vader himself ended up there. The fact that a relic that powerful was just sitting in a temple on a world the Empire already occupied and nobody thought to grab it first is either a massive oversight or proof that the bureaucracy was even worse than we thought. But if Mimban's Forgotten Force relic sounds bad, wait until you hear what the Sith left behind on Jabiim. The Jabiim Temple. Some Sith temples are built to last forever. This one was built on a planet that didn't want it there, and that's way more unsettling. Jabiim is, put simply, one of the most miserable planets in the galaxy. Constant rain, endless mud, and ground so unstable that entire settlements just sink into the earth without warning. It's the kind of place where nature actively rejects anything you try to build, which makes it a strange choice for anyone to establish a presence, let alone the Sith. But here's where it gets complicated. During the Clone Wars, Jabiim became a brutal war zone. Republic forces fought a devastating campaign on the surface, and Anakin Skywalker's task force was nearly wiped out entirely. The planet was so strategically cursed that the Republic essentially abandoned it, leaving its people to fend for themselves, which, not ideal, but beneath all that mud and misery, Jabiim held older secrets. The planet's deep cavern networks and unstable geology made it a natural hiding spot for things that weren't supposed to be found. Sith artifacts and remnants of dark side activity had a way of surfacing on worlds like this, buried under layers of geological chaos where nobody sane would bother digging. The real question nobody can answer is what's still down there. Jabim's surface literally swallows structures whole. Entire battlefields from the Clone Wars disappeared into the mud within years. Anything hidden underground before that, anything ancient, anything deliberately buried, could still be sitting in the dark under kilometers of wet rock, waiting for the ground to shift just right. But if a planet that swallows its own secrets sounds paranoid, wait until you hear what the Sith built on Arcanis. Palace of the Woolamander. The Palace of the Woolamander is one of those Sith temples that sounds almost goofy at first, and then gets way darker the more you look at it. Buried in the jungles of Yavin 4, southeast of the Great Temple, this place was originally a Massassi structure built in 3997 BBY under Exar Kun, who wanted even more Sith monuments to feed and amplify his power. So despite the weirdly playful name, this was not some harmless jungle ruin. It was part of the same dark machinery that made Yavin 4 one of the most infamous Sith worlds in Star Wars history. And the reason it matters is because this temple was hiding something genuinely horrific: the Golden Globe, a device that imprisoned the souls of Massassi children inside a sealed chamber. That detail alone turns the Palace of the Woolamander from obscure old ruin into deeply cursed Sith nightmare. Centuries later, the Jedi Master Ikrit found the globe, realized he could not free the trapped souls on his own, and literally put himself into a force trance to wait for someone who could. That is such a perfectly Star Wars kind of haunting image, an ancient Jedi silently waiting in the ruins of a Sith temple for the right moment to finally undo a crime that had been festering there for ages. What makes the palace even cooler is how it keeps changing roles across history. By the Galactic Civil War, it had decayed into a crumbling ruin and got its name from the Woolamanders living inside it, after a Sullustan explorer was basically chased off by the creatures. Later, there were even reports of rebel affiliates using the ruins as a base on Yavin 4. Then, in 22 ABY, Anakin Solo and Tahiri Vela finally uncovered the truth of the place, returned to it, and broke the curse, freeing the trapped Massassi souls at last. So the Palace of the Woolamander is this really fascinating mix of Sith temple, forgotten jungle ruin, accidental animal sanctuary, rebel hideout, and finally a place of long overdue release. But if the palace proved the Sith could mix souls with the Force, what happened on its surface proved what it costs when someone does something far worse. The Kesh Scythe Temple. The Kesh Sith Temple, in Legends, feels less like a simple Sith shrine and more like an entire civilization trying to convince itself it was still destined for greatness. Sitting high in the Takara Mountains on Kesh, it was built around the crash-landed Sith dreadnought Omen, and over time, it became this huge, multi-level mountain fortress with terraces, towers, a giant courtyard, living quarters, training spaces, Uvak stables, and even a planetarium lined with lignan crystals. So right away, this place has a different energy from a lot of Sith temples. It is not just a dark side relic. It is the headquarters, palace, and spiritual center of the lost tribe of Sith, all fused into one. And honestly, that is what makes it so cool. The Kesh Sith Temple is basically Sith history in one location, grand, paranoid, and absolutely soaked in betrayal. This was the site of the Red Sith Purge, where the tribe turned on its own and the dead were displayed in the courtyard while survivors were thrown from the cliffs. It was also the stage for the collapse of Yaru Corsin's family, with Sela and Jariad launching a coup, Nida crushing it, and Sela ultimately being left there in exile. After all of that, the temple stopped feeling like a glorious holy site and started feeling like a cursed monument to everything rotten at the center of Sith rule. It was sealed off and treated as forbidden ground for the next 2,000 years. What really pushes it into Great Sith Temple territory, though, is that it does not stay dead history. When the Lost Tribe fell into chaos during the time of the Rot, Varner Hiltz reopened the temple, uncovered the hidden map room beneath the Omen, and used that discovery to reunite the Sith around a new purpose. By 41 ABY, the temple was active again as a center for Sith training, with figures like Vistara Kai training there, and it became one of the key launch points for the tribe's return to the wider galaxy. So the Kesh Sith Temple is not just where the Lost Tribe lived, it is where they were built, where they broke, and where they decided they were going to matter again. But if a temple that was the home to the extermination of a tribe wasn't enough, wait until you see what Vader built himself on Mustafar, because that fortress wasn't just a home. Fortress Vader, Mustafar. There's something deeply poetic about Darth Vader building his castle on the planet where Anakin Skywalker died, and by poetic, I mean profoundly unhinged. Mustafar is where he lost his limbs, lost Padme, lost everything that made him human. So naturally, he looked at that hellscape and said, yeah, this is where I want my bedroom. Fortress Vader was constructed between 19 and 18 BBY, barely a year after the Empire rose to power, an obsidian monolith rising directly out of active lava flows, with 8-meter reinforced blast walls and tractor beam generators built into the structure. The whole thing looks like a gothic nightmare someone designed specifically to say, do not visit me. But here's the thing. It wasn't just intimidation architecture. Every element of Fortress Vader was engineered as a dark side amplifier. The black obsidian construction, the lava foundation beneath it, the internal geometry of the chambers themselves. All of it calibrated to intensify force abilities for one specific user. This wasn't a base of operations. It was a weapon platform built around a single man. At the center sat Vader's inner sanctum, which held a medical pod that sustained his broken body between missions. Half meditation chamber, half life support system. He'd float in Bacta, surrounded by volcanic rock and dark side energy, healing just enough to go destroy something else. Whether that's a temple or a prison depends entirely on your perspective. And the fan community has been arguing about that distinction for years, because the real question isn't what Fortress Vader was, it's who controlled it. Did Vader build himself an autonomous power base, or did Palpatine let his apprentice construct an elaborate cage he could monitor from Coruscant? A castle on the planet where you lost everything, gifted to you by the man who made you lose it. That's not a reward, that's a reminder. But if Vader's fortress channeled the dark side for one user, the temples on Moraband channeled it for an entire civilization. The Temple of Moraband. Moraband is the Sith homeworld. That's not a title it earned through conquest or some dramatic power play. It's where the Sith literally started. And the temple complex sitting on its surface is ancient beyond easy measurement, one of the oldest known Sith sites in the entire galaxy. For millennia, this place served as sacred ground for the Sith Order. Think of it less like a base of operations and more like a cathedral built on top of a graveyard. The Valley of the Dark Lords housed the tombs of powerful Sith, which is already a weird energy for a place people kept voluntarily visiting. Welcome to the pilgrimage. Don't touch anything. Don't listen to the whispers. Moving on. But the tombs aren't even the interesting part. The dark side energy concentrated on Moraband was so dense that the dead didn't stay quiet. Yoda visited during the Clone Wars and encountered visions, illusions, and the lingering presence of ancient Sith spirits actively trying to corrupt him. The planet didn't just store dark side history, it was still radiating it, thousands of years after the Sith abandoned the surface. That's not a ruin, that's a battery. Here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Palpatine's resurrection didn't come from Moraband, it came from Exegol, where the Sith Eternal Cult spent decades engineering his return through cloning, dark side rituals, and sheer fanatical devotion. But the foundational obsession with cheating death, that tradition stretches all the way back to worlds like Moraband. Palpatine didn't invent the idea. He inherited it from a lineage of Sith who spent centuries trying to beat the one opponent nobody could lightsaber their way past. Nobody knows the full extent of what Moraband's legacy seeded across the galaxy. Ancient tombs, millennia of accumulated tradition, and we've only seen fragments of what that knowledge eventually enabled. But if Moraband's ancient legacy could help inspire a resurrection across the entire galaxy, wait until you hear what was hiding in a valley literally named for the Sith, the Valley of the Scythe Temple. The Sith Academy on Korriban is basically the platonic ideal of a Sith temple. It is not just some spooky ruin with a dark backstory. It is the place where generations of Sith were trained, rebuilt, abandoned, and rebuilt again across multiple eras, starting in 3996 BBY under Exar Kun's followers. It sat in the Valley of the Dark Lords, surrounded by ancient tombs, and its whole purpose was to turn Force sensitives into Sith while also digging through old tombs and relics for even more forbidden knowledge. So right away, this place feels less like a temple in the religious sense, and more like a factory for manufacturing evil. What makes the Academy especially great for a video like this is how brutally Sith it is in practice. Getting in was awful, staying in was worse, and the whole system was built around fear, backstabbing, and survival. Prospective students either had to impress someone important enough to sponsor them, or just murder another student and take their medallion. Once inside, they were thrown into deadly competition where many of them straight up died trying to rise through the ranks. The Academy even kept prisoners around for torture and combat practice, which really tells you everything you need to know about the difference between a Jedi school and a Sith one. This was education, technically, but it was education run like a meat grinder. And the reason the Korriban Academy feels so iconic is because it never belongs to just one Sith era. Revan and Malak used it. Mitra Surik later found it half dead and automated, crawling with assassins. The revived Sith Empire rebuilt it into a full pyramid fortress again and trained hundreds more Sith there, and the Brotherhood of Darkness later reopened it too, with Darth Bane among its students. That gives the place this incredible feeling of continuity, like no matter how many times the Sith collapse, they keep crawling back to Korriban and rebuilding the same nightmare school all over again. So if you wanted one location that sums up the Sith as a civilization, obsessed with power, obsessed with ancient lore, and absolutely incapable of learning from their own disasters, the Sith Academy is probably the best example in all of Legends. Speaking of hidden worlds that nobody was supposed to find, let's talk about the one Palpatine turned into his personal doomsday bunker, the Temple of Exegol. Every other temple on this list had limits. A super weapon here, a tomb there, maybe a bioweapon lab if the Sith were feeling ambitious. Exegol didn't have limits. Exegol was the limit. Hidden in the unknown regions on a planet so hostile that navigating to it required a literal Sith wayfinder, this wasn't just Palpatine's backup plan, it was his backup civilization. During the reign of the Galactic Empire, the Emperor modernized ancient Sith shipyards and facilities on Exegol, turning something already terrifying into something that makes Fortress Vader look like a vacation home. The temple housed the Sith Eternal, an entire cult of dark side worshippers who were bred, engineered, and sustained indefinitely for one purpose: keeping the Sith alive no matter what. And when I say factory, I mean factory. Cloning research facilities powered by a dark side nexus churned out bodies for Palpatine to inhabit. Darkside practitioners were mass-produced like droids off an assembly line. The temple didn't preserve Sith tradition, it mechanized it. But here's where it gets genuinely apocalyptic. Underneath all of that, Exegol contained a fleet of approximately 14,000 Zistan-class Star Destroyers, each one equipped with planet-killing super laser technology. 14,000 Death Stars, basically, just sitting in a cave waiting for the signal. That's not a military strategy, that's a doomsday cult's insurance policy. If I can't rule the galaxy, nobody gets to have it. The community has strong opinions about this one. The construction timeline alone raises questions. Who built 14,000 Star Destroyers in secret? Where did the materials come from? How did nobody notice? These are valid concerns that still fuel debate about whether Exegol represents the ultimate expression of Sith philosophy or a desperate lore-breaking perversion of it. Either way, the galaxy came closer to total extinction here than anywhere else on this list. And that's not an exaggeration, that's just math. The Sith have built some of the most terrifying machines in galactic history. From stealth fighters to planet-killing dreadnoughts, every ship was designed to make the galaxy afraid. Today, I'm breaking down every major Sith spacecraft and what made them dangerous. Starting with a ship so personal, it was basically a lightsaber with an engine bolted to it. The Scimitar, Sith Infiltrator. There's something almost romantic about a Sith Lord and his personal murder ship. The Scimitar was a 26.5-meter Sith Infiltrator built for one purpose: letting Darth Maul show up where nobody expected him and ruin everyone's day. This thing had cloaking technology that predated mainstream galactic cloaking systems by decades. Laser cannons, plasma torpedoes, deployable probe droids. For a ship its size, it had zero business being that dangerous. But here's the thing. Maul didn't just pilot the Scimitar. His force sensitivity let him push the ship past its own design limits, turning a stealth craft into a guided missile with opinions. It earned its reputation as the vessel of the Phantom Menace because nothing else in the galaxy moved like it. And when Obi-Wan cut Maul in half on Naboo, Sidious recovered the ship. Because of course he did. You don't leave the most advanced infiltration platform in the galaxy collecting dust on a landing pad. But if the Scimitar was a personal weapon for one Sith, the next ship was built for an entire empire's worth of them, the Fury-class Interceptor. If the Scimitar was about sneaking up on you, the Fury-class Interceptor was about punching you in the face before you even knew there was a fight. This thing was 25 meters of pure distilled Sith aggression with zero interest in self-preservation. Here's the thing, it had a hyperdrive rivaling ships 10 times its size, multiple laser cannons, and a guided missile system, all crammed into a starfighter. Every single engagement was designed as an all-or-nothing opening strike. You either obliterated your target in the first pass or you were already dead. But here's where it gets complicated. The Fury class had the defensive capability of a wet napkin. Minimal shields, paper-thin hull plating, zero redundancy. One lucky shot from a half-awake gunner, and the whole thing folded like a lawn chair. And because the fuel reserves were basically non-existent, you couldn't even run away if things went sideways. You had enough juice to get there, start a fight, and hopefully win it. That was the entire operational plan. It's the most Sith ship ever built. All offense, no backup plan, and absolutely no interest in what happens if something goes wrong. But if you think reckless aggression is a design flaw, wait until you see what Vader did when the Empire gave him his own personal fighter, Darth Vader's TIE Advanced X-1. Everyone knows what Vader's TIE looks like. That bent-wing black silhouette is burned into the brain of every person who's ever watched Star Wars. But here's the thing nobody really thinks about. The TIE Advanced X-1 wasn't just a ship Vader happened to fly. It was specifically engineered to be everything a standard TIE wasn't. A 9.2-meter fighter with twin laser cannons, actual shields, and an independent hyperdrive, which no regular TIE pilot was getting anywhere near. Several prototypes were flown by elite Imperial pilots. But Vader's personal vessel was the one that mattered, because the real nightmare was what happened when you put a Sith Lord inside it. Vader's force prescience merged with the ship's systems to create something that felt almost alive in combat. He wasn't reacting to enemy pilots, he was reacting to what they were about to do. Alliance pilots figured out pretty quickly that a black TIE advanced on sensors meant you were probably already dead. Other pilots could fly the X-1 and fly it well, but in Vader's hands, the gap between elite Imperial craft and unstoppable killing machine was the Force itself. The hardware was impressive. The pilot made it legendary. But if a single fighter elevated by one Sith Lord sounds excessive, wait until you see what happens when the Sith build something the size of a small moon and strap experimental weapons to it. The Malevolence. Most warships in Star Wars want to blow you up. The Malevolence wanted something worse. It wanted to turn your ship into a coffin. This 4,845-meter separatist behemoth carried paired mega-ion cannons that could disable entire starship formations in a single salvo. Not destroy, disable. Engines, weapons, communications, life support, all of it gone. You're just floating there in the dark, suffocating, watching your oxygen tick down to zero, which is, not ideal. And General Grievous knew exactly how to use it. He'd activate the experimental cloaking system, sneak up on isolated convoys and medical stations, fire the ion cannons, and then pick apart the helpless wreckage at his leisure, medical facilities. He was deliberately targeting medical facilities. Hey, where should we aim this weapon of mass suffering? How about the hospital? Perfect. But here's the thing. The Malevolence was experimental, and experimental means flawed. The ion cannons needed lengthy recharge cycles between firings, leaving the ship basically defenseless. Republic forces figured this out and started swarming it with fighters during those windows, chipping away at a ship that could kill fleets but couldn't swat a handful of bombers. The final blow came when Anakin Skywalker engineered a hyperspace collision straight into the Malevolence's weakened rear shields. One jump, and the most terrifying weapon in the Separatist Navy was scrap metal. But if the Malevolence was Grievous at his most creative, wait until you see the ship he actually called home. The Invisible Hand. Most flagships get destroyed. That's just how it goes. But the Invisible Hand is interesting because it wasn't picked off in some routine fleet engagement. It was boarded by Jedi, ripped in half, and crash-landed on Coruscant. That sequence tells you everything about how important this ship actually was. The Invisible Hand was a 1,088-meter Separatist warship serving as General Grievous's personal mobile command center. It carried turbo lasers, laser cannons, and massive complements of battle droids. Solid ship, well-armed, but the weapons weren't the point. Here's the thing. The Invisible Hand functioned as the central nervous system of the entire Separatist military. Its communication arrays coordinated whole fleets across the Outer Rim. Every major operation, every tactical decision flowed through this one hull. And Grievous, being Grievous, made himself the beating heart of all of it. You know what that makes you? The single point of failure for an entire galactic military. The Republic figured this out. When Anakin and Obi-Wan launched their rescue operation, the battle tore the Invisible Hand apart. Grievous escaped in a pod, because of course he did, and the forward half plummeted toward Coruscant's surface. The flagship that coordinated the Separatist war effort didn't go down in some glorious last stand. It broke in two and belly flopped onto a landing strip. Grievous built the most efficient military headquarters in the galaxy and then painted a giant target on it, which is, not ideal. But if the Invisible Hand was a command center pretending to be a warship, the next ship is a warship that never had to pretend to be anything, the Devastator. You know this ship. Even if you don't know its name, you know this ship. The Imperial Star Destroyer is the most recognizable warship in science fiction, and the Devastator is the one that kicked the door down in the very first scene of the very first Star Wars movie. 1,600 meters of wedge-shaped tyranny, armed with turbo lasers, ion cannons, tractor beams, and full squadrons of TIE fighters ready to launch at a moment's notice. The Devastator wasn't flashy, it wasn't experimental. It was the bread and butter of Imperial naval dominance. And honestly, it didn't need to be anything more than what it was. That wedge-shaped silhouette dropping out of hyperspace above your planet was often enough to end a conflict before it started. Entire systems surrendered just because one of these things showed up in orbit. But here's the thing. For all its firepower and intimidation factor, the Star Destroyer class has one of the most baffling design flaws in military history. The shield geometry left gaps because of the hull's sheer size. The aft sections were significantly less armored than the front. And then there's the bridge tower just sitting up there on top of the ship like a birthday candle on a cake, completely exposed. One targeted strike on that tower and you decapitate the entire command structure, even if the rest of the ship is perfectly fine. It's Imperial arrogance in physical form. Build the scariest thing in the galaxy, then stick the brain on the outside. But if the Devastator represents the Empire's standard issue Iron Fist, the First Order decided that fist wasn't big enough. The Finalizer. The Finalizer is a Resurgent-class Star Destroyer stretching roughly 2,916 meters long, and on paper, it's everything the First Order wanted the galaxy to see. Advanced turbo lasers, electronic warfare suites, sophisticated enough to generate false sensor readings and scramble enemy communications, and a hyperdrive system built for rapid strategic repositioning. This thing was designed to show up fast, hit hard, and make sure nobody could call for help while it happened. General Hux commanded the Finalizer with the kind of rigid, obsessive discipline you'd expect from a man who probably ironed his socks. This was the ship that hunted the map to Luke Skywalker, that deployed Kylo Ren to Jakku, that served as the First Order's forward blade during its most critical operations. Hux treated the bridge like a personal throne room, and that's where the problem started. The Finalizer's fatal flaw wasn't a shield gap or a reactor vulnerability, it was ego. Hux didn't just command this ship, he wore it like a crown. The Finalizer became the physical manifestation of his authority, but his obsession with control meant he was constantly at odds with Kylo Ren, who treated the entire vessel like his personal anger management facility. Consoles got slashed, officers flinched every time Ren walked onto the bridge, and Hux could do absolutely nothing about it. You can run the tightest ship in the fleet, but it doesn't matter when a force-wielding maniac is carving up your equipment every time he gets bad news. Sometimes the most dangerous thing on your flagship is the guy standing next to you on the bridge, which is, not ideal, but if you think clashing egos can sink a Star Destroyer, wait until you see what happens when you scale that concept up to 19,000 meters. The Executor, Superstar Destroyer, 19 kilometers. That's how long the Executor was. You could line up nearly 12 standard Star Destroyers end to end and still not match this thing's length. Darth Vader's personal flagship wasn't just a ship, it was a floating empire. The Executor carried hundreds of turbo laser batteries, tractor beams powerful enough to snag capital ships out of the sky, and interceptor squadrons that made a regular Star Destroyer's fighter complement look like a hobby collection. You didn't fight the Executor, you just sort of existed near it until it decided you shouldn't anymore. And commanding all of this was Vader himself, who maintained crew discipline through a unique management style, military professionalism, and casual force choking. If you were a captain aboard the Executor and you disappointed Lord Vader, your career ended, along with your breathing, which is one way to run a tight ship. But here's where it gets ironic. That reputation for strangling anyone who failed him, it might have been the exact thing that killed the Executor. During the Battle of Endor, a single rebel A-wing crashed into the bridge deflector shields. The shields went down, the bridge was exposed, and the officers inside needed to act fast. Instead, they panicked. 19 kilometers of the most powerful warship in the Imperial fleet, and it went nose first into the Death Star 2, because the guys at the controls were too terrified of Vader to think straight. Turns out, when you execute every officer who makes a mistake, the survivors don't get braver, they just freeze. Pretty expensive lesson in management theory. But if the Executor's size was its downfall, wait until you see what the First Order built when they decided bigger was still better. The Supremacy. Snoke's Megastar Destroyer was, on paper, the most ambitious warship ever constructed. Spanning roughly 13,000 meters in length, it was actually shorter than the Executor, but its 60-kilometer wingspan gave it a total volume that dwarfed anything the Empire ever built. This wasn't just a flagship, it was a floating capital city. The Supremacy functioned as the central nervous system of the entire First Order military apparatus, housing advanced targeting systems, massive starfighter complements, and command and control arrays that coordinated operations across the galaxy in real time. Supreme Leader Snoke commanded the Supremacy with strategic patience, treating it less like a warship and more like an impregnable mobile throne room. He directed galactic conquest from its bridge with the calm certainty of someone who genuinely believed nothing in the universe could touch him. His confidence in the vessel's invulnerability was so absolute that he maintained his command center aboard even during active combat operations. Why wouldn't he? The thing was basically a country with engines. But here's where hubris writes, a check the hull can't cash. The Supremacy was cleaved nearly in half when Vice Admiral Holdo executed a hyperspace ram with a single resistance cruiser. One ship, one person, willing to die. That's all it took. The concentrated kinetic energy of a vessel jumping to light speed directly through your hull turns out to be something no amount of shielding was designed to handle, which is, not ideal when your entire military infrastructure lives inside one target. It's the ultimate size is an everything moment in Star Wars history. Snoke built a ship so massive, he forgot that invulnerability is a feeling, not a fact. And one woman with nothing left to lose proved the difference. But if the Supremacy's planet killer cosplay ended in embarrassment, wait until you see what the Final Order strapped to every single Star Destroyer in their fleet. The Ziston-class destroyer. Palpatine looked at the Death Star, a moon-sized battle station that took decades to build and was destroyed twice, and thought, what if I made that smaller and put it on every single ship? That's the Ziston-class Star Destroyer. 3,000 meters of Final Order engineering, each one mounting an axial superlaser capable of cracking a planet from orbit. Not one planet killer, not two. An entire fleet of them, hundreds of Star Destroyers that could each do what the Death Star did, individually, from the comfort of low orbit. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. These ships weren't crewed by standard Imperial recruits or drafted civilians. Every single officer aboard those destroyers was cultivated in secret on Exegol for decades, selected specifically for absolute ruthlessness and the psychological capacity to execute orders that would result in the deaths of billions without flinching. An entire generation of people raised from birth with one job: operate apocalyptic weapons and feel nothing about it. That's not a military, that's a factory for producing sociopaths. So you've got hundreds of planet-killing warships crewed by people who were literally engineered to not care about genocide. Unstoppable, right? Turns out, no. The entire Ziston fleet required a shared navigation signal broadcast from a single tower on Exegol just to leave the atmosphere. One signal, one tower, every planet killer in the fleet was grounded without it. The most destructive armada ever assembled couldn't find the exit. Palpatine miniaturized the Death Star's greatest weapon, mass-produced it, handed it to an army of zealots, and then made the whole thing dependent on what was essentially a Wi-Fi router. It's the most Sith thing imaginable. Unlimited power, undone by centralized control obsession. But if you think a fleet of planet killers sounds excessive, wait until you see what happens when the Sith put a super laser on something even bigger. The Eclipse-class Dreadnought. At some point, building a bigger ship stops being a military decision and becomes a psychological disorder. The Eclipse-class dreadnought is where the Sith crossed that line and kept walking. This thing measured 1,700 meters long. A regular Star Destroyer is 600 meters, and people already considered those overkill. The Eclipse was 11 of those stacked end to end, and building it required the entire industrial output of a galactic sector, not a planet, a sector. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource pipeline in an entire region of space, all funneled into one ship, which is, not ideal for your regional economy. But here's what made it truly terrifying. The Eclipse carried a super laser capable of cracking a planet's crust wide open, not vaporizing the whole thing like the Death Star, but surgically selecting what it wanted to destroy. Precision apocalypse. On top of that, the ship was wrapped in overlapping shield systems, powerful enough to absorb sustained fire from entire enemy fleets. You could throw everything you had at it, and the Eclipse would just sit there, mildly inconvenienced. Command authority was restricted to officers who answered directly to the Sith Emperor. Their identities were classified, not low-level classified, the kind where even knowing who captained this ship was considered a strategic intelligence asset. The Sith kept the Eclipse's existence hidden from their own allies because merely acknowledging it gave enemies something to plan against. But the fatal flaw was the super laser's charging cycle. Between shots, the most powerful warship ever built became temporarily vulnerable. A coordinated assault combining an external fleet attack with internal sabotage during that exact window brought it down. Killed from the inside while catching its breath. Turns out, even a planet killer has to exhale eventually. But if you think a ship that cracks planets is the ceiling for Sith engineering, you haven't met the weapon that kills stars. The Sun Crusher. 60 meters. That's it. The Sun Crusher was 60 meters long, smaller than most freighters hauling cargo across the outer rim, and it could destroy entire star systems. Here's how it worked. The Sun Crusher fired resonance torpedoes directly into stars. Not at planets, not at fleets, at stars. The torpedoes destabilized the star's core, triggering a supernova that annihilated everything orbiting it. Every planet, every moon, every station, every living thing. One shot, one system, billions dead. And the ship that did all of this could be crewed by a skeleton team with zero supply lines. A self-sufficient apocalypse the size of a yacht. The shielding was equivalent to capital ships dozens of times its size, and the acceleration was so extreme that nothing larger could catch it. You couldn't outgun it, you couldn't outrun it, and you couldn't hide from it because it didn't need to find you. It just needed to find your son. Even Imperial leadership kept its existence buried. The Sun Crusher was a secret Navy project hidden away under Admiral Dalla's oversight. When the people who build planet killers for fun look at something and go, yeah, let's maybe keep this one quiet, you've crossed a line. And that's exactly how it met its end. Not by a bigger weapon, not by a fleet, by being dragged into the gravitational maw of a black hole because the only way to stop a star killer was to throw it somewhere even a star killer couldn't survive, which is, the most Imperial thing imaginable. Overwhelming power married to the absolute arrogance that something this dangerous can actually be controlled. The galaxy's most destructive weapon didn't need an enemy. It was always its own worst one. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.